All right, and we are live. This is Hotep with Bob Horn and Erik Reichers, the guys who throw that crazy good barbecue, which I was telling them I want to bring Matthew Weiss this time. Actually, he can bring himself and his wonderful wife. She's cool, man. She can sing. Let's see. Happy birthday to Desiree Monique, Reed Washington, or Washington Reed, however you said, and Ghost Webb, Robert Weber, Pensadian. Happy birthday, bro. All you guys out at in Nashville at NAMM, Grant Walden, Colt Caperon, Chris Love, Stephen Sheffield. Yeah, keep sending those pics. And for Stephen Sheffield, thanks to Studio Link VST for helping him out. Our community actually helps out each other pretty good sometimes. You'll see us in these chat rooms and we'll be going at it crazy, like me and Matthew Weiss in there talking crap to people, you know, debating and whatever. But the part of the reality is our community really does give back and help out. Like Bob and Erik came through on an event, my first event, which was a songwriting event. A lot of lessons learned, but they came through, and Eric Rossi, no money, just coming through to help out. And Brad Chapman participated, which we're planning this one the next one a year in advance. Mentors Lab is a year in advance. Because who was it? Herb Trawick told me that when they plan events, they do it a year in advance, and that way they get their stuff together. And I just decided, hey, we're going to do it. We did it. This time we're going to actually plan it out and, you know, just take his advice. So, Bob and Erik, explain this mix thing you guys are about to do, please.
Basically, wanted to do a mix review for up and coming mix engineers, more so the newbies than the pros or even more the seasoned guys. This is more for people just starting out or a couple years in, and what we wanted to do was not just listen to their 2-track mix and review it, but actually go through their session plugin by plugin, track by track. And the reason is a lot of times when people have asked me to listen to mixes and give them feedback, it's hard to know the potential of the individual tracks and what they had to work with. So you can comment on something or imagine, that something could be bigger or better or something like that, but you don't know what they had to work with. They might have had a vocal with printed on it and they couldn't do anything about it, or, just the ability to go into their session and bypass the plugins and see what the original track was, and then look at the plugins and see what they did. We can give them a lot more detail about what they could have done better, what they did perfectly, and so on. So the idea is that they submit an MP3 by July 21st. We're going to go through all of them and pick one that we think we can lend the most help to. We have time for more, 2 or 3, but for now we're just saying that we're going to do one. And once we pick that, we will reach out to them and ask them for the Pro Tools session. And unfortunately, it'll have to be in Pro Tools because that's what we work with here. So that's how we're going to be able to open their session, and we have the most plugins for that. So we'd have to own plugins and all the extra DAWs and everything to be able to open it up to everybody. So for this mix review, it's just Pro Tools. And we on our website, we have a list of plugins that we have just so they know they can be compatible. We're running Pro Tools 12, the latest version. So as long as they're using Pro Tools, they can look at our plugin list, and we should be able to open their session just fine. So that's kind of the idea.
Say it again.
What's the website?
It's echobarstudios.com and /mix review.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that. I mean, really, the whole thing is kind of in the spirit of something that Bob and I always take advantage of quite a bit, actually, is if, we're working on projects for our clients, a lot of times we'll just come across the hall and be walking in the room just to say hey, and it's like, oh man, that you're here. Hey, can you put your ear on this real quick and just give me some feedback, you know? And that's been, I don't know, even when Dave was in here and he was working out of here, the three of us all kind of shared that community, which was great. I mean, it was really nice to be able to have one of your colleagues come in and just, you know, give you some feedback and give you some, you know, creative, you know, pointers or some helpful pointers. I always have appreciated that. And that being said, we just, you know, we kind of feel like a lot of guys don't necessarily get that opportunity because they're either mixing out of their room at home. They don't have a partner right across the hall. You know, they're not in a bigger facility. So that's another part of this whole thing, is really in that spirit of trying to help out and help out your friends, you know? So
how much does that really help you guys? Has it saved your butts or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just you know, like if Eric walks in my room when I'm mixing, and you know, I've been listening to the same thing for 8 hours, and he tells me, man, that hi-hat's a little extra bright, and I was just not even paying attention to the hi-hat. You know, I was just focused on the vocals, and you know, it can definitely save me from having to, you know, go back to something later. You know, and even just opinions, like, you know, just abstract stuff. You know, just taste. You know, just for someone to say, I think the vocal should be a little wetter, and here I was liking it dry, and I was like, well, let me try it with a little more verb, and all of a sudden, you know what, I do like that better. Good idea. You know, just that kind of more two heads are better than one kind of thing. You know, and then of course you know, having Pensado in our facility for a few years, I mean, we learned so much from doing that with him. You know, and it's just great to, you know, be able to have someone collaborate briefly on your own mix you're doing.
You guys would actually sit up and chit chat, like you and Dave.
Yeah, we're 15 feet from each other, you know, so it's like, you know, take a break. He'll come over to my room, and you know, I'll be playing something, and then I can ask him, hey, what do you think of this bass sound? And he can be like, tell me what he thinks, and then same thing, you know, I would still, now that he's next door instead of in the same building, we still go over there, and he'll ask us, you know, hey, what do you think of this mix? And, you know, so it's definitely helpful.
See, your facility, to me, I keep picturing your facility as a place where sooner or later we'll do an event where songs are done, like people pay to come in there and do songs with you guys, to where it's like what we did at Mentors Lab. You go in, we record live drums. People are paying. Nobody's sitting back watching. Everybody has a job. They're participating, so that when they leave with actual skill sets where they've done work. Hopefully, you guys will start doing that, because I'm thinking that your spot is perfect for it, and you guys are perfect for it. You guys over there doing that stuff all the time.
Cool.
So I'm putting that in your ear right now for you guys.
All right.
Okay, so the guys, when they submit these mixes, is there any paperwork that they need to make sure that they have straight? Because I know they've got to own the song and have the rights. So
yeah,
is there to submit to you guys?
Or permission from the owners of the song. That has to be. I mean, basically, if you submit by submitting, because that's what we have on the page where you have to read the rules. If you submit, you're basically agreeing to that.
Yeah.
So,
since there's nothing for sale, there's no legal trouble. But if they don't really have the right to let us post a mix review on the song on YouTube, then in the end it'll just get taken down, and they'll lose out. So it's to their advantage to make sure that they have permission from the artist, or they are the artist, you know, that kind of thing.
Where do we submit this at now?
It's echobarstudios.com /mix review.
/mix review. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, that's the web address. So that's where it's at.
Okay. All right, Matthew. I'm throwing to you, bro, Mr. Brainiac and Mr. X Mix Review dude. Well, you might still be doing it.
I would still do mix reviews every day. People send me a lot of those things. Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of the questions I was gonna ask, but basically, yeah, you sort of caught me off guard because I was actually on the Echo Bar Studios website looking it up. The only thing I can think is, when did we agree that I was treating you to a beer? That's the only question in my mind at the moment. All right, so Bob, I know you've done some educational stuff. You've done some stuff with Warren. You've done some stuff with Pro Studio Live. Eric, have you done educational? You did something with Warren too, didn't you?
Yeah, Bob and I did a kind of a collaboration one with Warren and a band called Little Empire. So we did a whole, it was like 3 days of crazy. It was recording, producing, and mixing. We both did 2 different mixes, and we did mix reviews of the same song, which we both mixed independently, and it was those ended up being two parts of that course as well.
Ended up being a 10-hour course.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Well, okay, so this is not your first rodeo here when it comes to the educational side of things. So what was the, so you kind of answered this already, but I was going to say, what was the inspiration for doing it, and what's kind of making this sort of a different take? Because what you're doing is kind of unique, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and it's definitely a test for us. I mean, it'll be our first time doing this kind of mixed review where we actually open someone's session. So we're hoping that it doesn't backfire or take us weeks to do, you know. But I know, like, people will send me mixes and they already sound pretty decent, and I'm kind of like, well, I mean, I would have added a little more low end on the kick drum, but I guess it's cool. And they sound decent enough where I can't come up with a lot of comments because they're just opinions, and where these people are looking for factual, this is too bright, or this is distorted, or this is wrong. And so having the session and being able to, you know, like, look at a piano and be like, you know, I would have made this wider, and know that it can be wider. You know, it's not something's not messed up with it on the actual track. I think that's going to kind of raise the bar of the review process.
I find the hardest thing, because I've done this privately with people, never like in a public way, but the toughest thing that I've found in doing it has been sort of trying to maintain the perspective of what the artist is going for and then translating it to my own sensibilities. Because it's one thing when you're starting the mix from the ground up. It's another thing when you get the mix in and you have to say, well, okay, maybe this isn't the way that I would do it, but is it working? So that to me is usually the big challenge.
Right. Well, on the website, Eric posted some questions that we want included when they submit their MP3, which I think are pretty good. I don't remember the exact questions, but they were like, what did you feel like you accomplished well in the mix? What did you have trouble with?
And songs, what songs were you referencing, if you were referencing anything, and then what were you comparing? You know, what were you listening to in those reference songs, and then you were comparing in your own mix?
So hopefully they go into good detail and they let us know, like, I was doing this for an artist in my community, and she was really unhappy, and this is why she was unhappy, and she just hated the vocal sound, and that's what I had trouble with. What do you think I could do? And then we can really go into it and be like, well, you know what? The recording is actually bad, you know, now that we've bypassed all your plugins. So you should start there and redo the recording if you have the time, blah, blah, blah. So it could be a really neat thing depending on who submits and you know, what information they give us.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it. I have my intern send you one.
Nice.
Let's see, and I expect only the most brutal criticisms.
Yeah,
I mean that's what I got.
nice.
All right, who has the next question? Who wants to go next? Charles? Dave? Go ahead, Charles. I couldn't hear you.
Can we hear? Okay, can you hear? All right. Bob, Eric, what's going on, guys? All right, so, you know, we had Slate and who was that? Squaring off, not squaring off, but who was that again?
Kenny Joya.
Just recently.
Kenny Joya.
Kenny, yeah. Will we ever see, a Bob and Eric square off, I think it's beneficial, and not in a not in a competitive way, but in a more of a educational way,
Do you guys know what he's talking about?
live.
Yeah. Now, we kind of did that with the Little Empire track.
Yeah, with
Warren Hewitt's course.
the Warren thing, we did that. I mean, it wasn't the Stephen Slate Kenny one was a little more publicized as just that, where our thing was kind of built into the course. But in that Warren Hewitt course, we definitely, I do a mix and I break it all down, and Erik does a mix and he breaks it all down. And they're definitely completely different mixes. Erik's is a little more rock, mine's a little more pop. And it's funny because right after that, a few people actually liked Erik's better, and I was kind of jealous. And then maybe a couple months later, there were some comments of people like mine better. So it's really it's cool because it's just preference, what style you like, So yeah, I mean, we've done that before. We could do that again, but yeah, I don't know.
I see it as a iron sharpens iron type of thing. I respect you guys. In this business, and it's man, you guys have been in the business for years. I've been in the business for years, on multiple, from being an artist, now a studio owner, mix engineer, but it's what you call metamorphosis, I guess, between you guys, because you guys are growing, and I don't even know how long have you guys actually been working together. I never asked that question.
Well, we met each other in 1998. We've always kind of had each other's back, going through the process, becoming engineers, and through assisting and all that stuff back in the day. We moved out to California at the same time, and then we worked separately for years. And then around 2010, we started to get the idea to build the Echo Bar and have a studio together. So we've had the Echo Bar from 2011 till now. So it's been about 7 years, 6-7 years.
What is it that you guys are mostly recording out of there?
Well, it's I mean, Erik and I basically run separate businesses under the same roof. So Erik has his clients, and we both have access to the live room and all the booths. So we basically just work off of a calendar system where if I'm booking a client, I'll look at the calendar and make sure that Erik's not using the live room. But then since I do a lot of mixing, that we don't really interfere with each other a lot. So a lot of times I'll be in my room mixing, and Erik will be in his room recording. But we kind of do everything. I mean,
yeah, I've had sessions from just recently I did a session with DMC where he came in and we tracked everything live. So it was drums, bass, guitar, had him in a booth on a mic. We even had the turntables hooked up, and we did passes like that, from the ground up, which was really cool. And then
Patti LaBelle Choir,
or no, it was
Gladys Knight.
Gladys Knight. Yeah, Gladys Knight. We had 30 people in our live room, singing an arrangement of Imagine by John Legend. Lennon. Fail. Lennon. Yeah. And then also, I mean, everything from just, vocal sessions. We did I had a string session in here the other day, octet. It was great. 6 violins, viola, and a cello. With horn sections. We do.
I even had a marching drum line from Crenshaw High School in there one time. It's the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life.
So wide gamut.
Yeah.
A lot of different stuff.
He was talking about the mix off. Eric Rossi and Matthew Weiss were having fun doing it too, and what's cool is the stuff was all fun instead of guys, cussing each other out, and it was actually cool, and you got to see guys interact in a respectful way. And Erik Rossi and that HG2, that thing you got. Wait, both you guys have the HG2?
We both have the plug-in. I have the hardware. Yep.
Yeah, only you have the hardware, right? And Erik does not.
I got the plug.
Yep. Okay. Erik, don't lie, man. What's up with that HG2, man? Snitch on it.
What's up with the HD2?
Yeah.
I love that thing. I do. I use it on all sorts of stuff. Just it's great on bass, and it's great on drum bus sometimes. It's great on guitars. Love it on heavy rock distorted guitars. It's fun. I think I saw Erik. Well, Erik's actually been here recently. He was working on his own project with some artists and producer Gage, and they've been down here actually doing some tracking. But I was talking to him about it, and he told me he had his reservations about whether the team that did all the coding and did all the algorithms were going to be able to pull off some of the more nuanced type stuff that he was really, really excited about the hardware unit himself. And some of the ways just that the different controls will manipulate some of the other, playing with the controls together will manipulate some of the more detailed characteristics of the box. And he was kind of like, I just don't know if they're going to be able to replicate that in the code. And without a doubt, he told me he was just blown away by how amazing of a job they did on the actual algorithm process. So
what are you able to actually do to the sound? And I'm asking you because Bob's been using that hardware for years, so he has this like little real nuanced stuff where he can compare. But to me right now, you're the hip hop guy who's just like, hey, I got a plug in, let's go. What do you actually notice that it's doing, or what is it?
To me, it seems like, especially if you're looking for things to have a little more clarity, a little more detail, it'll add that harmonic distortion in there, which to my ear anyway it'll pull things from the back of the mix to the front. They just sort of jump out a little bit more if you're having a hard time, rather than like grabbing an EQ and trying to turn something up to be able to get it to be more forward, maybe mid-range or something, and you're trying to get it to come forward to you. This achieves that, but without having to grab an EQ type thing, to my ear. Especially, I keep going back to bass, but bass, I love it on bass because you can get it to get dirty and gritty, and have bass have its place where you can hear it instead of it just being sort of a low-end muddy rumble type thing. So that's one of my favorite things, using the plugin on bass.
And Bob, since you actually have the hardware, would you speak on it and clue us in?
Yeah, I mean, the hardware and the plugin are scary close. It's as far as an emulation, they're two of the closest things. UAD does tons of emulations, so do a lot of other companies, and those are all, a lot of those are really close to the original. But the HC2 plugin is scary close. One thing that I think is better on the plugin is the air section, because it actually has a volume control for the amount of air, where the hardware just has a on and off switch. And I always find myself, not always, but sometimes I find myself with the air on the hardware where it's too much when it's in and not enough when it's out. So the plugin is great having that amount knob. And I don't know, maybe that's a mod Erik could do on the hardware, but that's pretty cool. And just the ability to use it, a million times in your session where you only have one hardware box, traditionally. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll use the hardware for like a guitar bus or something like that, and then I'll use the plugin individually on a bunch of different things. And I just like it. Just adds what I would call like a vibe to a sound. So if you just have a dry track, you put on that dry track, it just gives it a little something extra. It's kind of like that. I don't know. Just you can get grit out of it. You can just, even if you use it subtly, it changes the sound and makes it just a little bit cooler, a little less flat and lifeless. It adds kind of a little bit of life to it. And again, with the plugin, you also have a mix knob, which you don't on the hardware. So the plugin's pretty great. It's I love the hardware. I like using the hardware on tracking. It's cool on vocals to add a little bit of grit on the way in. It's a little bit dangerous because you're stuck with it when you're recording, but it definitely can give you a good vibe, especially like indie rock stuff or hard rock stuff. just making the vocal not so pretty and clean when you're using a super squeaky clean tube mic, you know.
I am so used to plugins, and I'm slowly getting experience with high-end, high-quality hardware. And Brian Keith out here bought the preamp, and it's really cool how, like, I have this thing about not wanting the vocals to be harsh, but I want them to be in your face, and it's like it'll sweeten it. There's just, you turn the knobs and there's a softening of the stuff attacking my ears. What I like, me on that HG, 'cause I'm about to have the HG2. I'm wanting to record through it. Like, I record through plugins. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. I'll set up an aux in Pro Tools and record through plugins and commit.
Right.
And I've been doing that for years and been loving it. And I can't wait to actually do that with the HG2 and find out, you know, really dig into it first, experiment with it, and then strategically use that thing. But I really have no idea what to expect, because when you showed, so far, what you showed me, Bob, when you showed me on mixes, it's sort of, I don't even know how to describe it.
It's a hard thing to describe. It's
like a sheen or
experience. You got experience.
depth type weird. I don't know, but it was cool, and it was something that I couldn't add to the mix with all the tricks that I do, all the crazy stuff I do. I wasn't able to add whatever the hell it was he has going on in that box.
I have a video on Plugin Alliance, Plugin Alliance's website, where I do a 15-minute overview of the HG2 plugin. And if you watch that, the hardware does the same thing. So whatever you see me talk about with the plugin, the hardware, you know, reacts to instruments the same way. So I think I go through drums, bass, and some percussion stuff, and a guitar. I think four things. But people really liked that video. You know,
Okay.
just find out what it does.
Now on this mix review stuff, are you guys actually going to mix the song?
I think we're kind of playing that by ear. We might mix elements. So like if we pull up the lead vocal, and we don't like what the person did, or we think it could be better, we might duplicate the vocal next to it, start over with plugins, and kind of do what we might do, and then compare it and show, you know, if you did this, it would be less harsh, or you got too many plugins, you don't need all that stuff, go a little simpler, you know, that kind of thing. So we'll probably do an A-B thing with parts rather than an entire whole new mix, just for time's sake, really, because I think that could end up doing the review and doing a whole new mix all in one video would make it a really long video. So we'll probably do it more like that, where we instrument by instrument will A-B things, and maybe we'll fix something and put it in the mix. I don't know. It's going to be our first one we've ever done, so we're kind of not sure how it ends up.
Yeah, I've been even kind of toying with the idea, and I'm just sort of brainstorming out loud. But I think because it's going to be, I mean, we literally plan on going through each track in the song, and so what I think is maybe what we end up having to do, we'll discuss it a little bit more, I guess, which is we probably got to break it up into several parts of a video, you know, because the whole thing is going to be definitely more than an hour. So if it was like we just focused on the drums for one section, you know, it's like, okay, here we worked on the drums, here we worked on guitars, here we worked on vocals, and maybe those end up becoming, you know, different parts of an overall, you know, review, where they just have to be released individually because it's going to be such a long video.
What might happen though is as we do A/B stuff and improve on things, you know, copy the tracks, duplicate the tracks, and, you know, reprocess things. Maybe we'll leave the new ones in that same mix session, so you're hearing them in the mix that's already going. So maybe by the end of it, we will have a new mix where, you know, we've improved on a bunch of things and maybe left some things alone, you know, that were good. And I mean, we'll always be playing those things within the mix context. So it might actually end up naturally that we have a new mix by the end of it that we can just play and has been updated. So
Okay. Day 4, I'm gonna throw to you. Matthew Weiss, he took second place in that mixed competition in Consolidated Students that we hosted, and so he, fellow named Ron, are getting the HG2. It's my responsibility to get it to him, and I've been slacking. I get it to you, bruh. So Matthew can come back and tell us what he thinks. So Dave, go ahead.
What's up, guys?
Hey, what's up, Dave?
Hey, I have a question on data management. How do you guys handle your backups? Are you networked between your two systems? Do you do any offsite backup? What's your data policy for clients that bring projects in?
I personally threaten to delete the song until I get my check. No, I'm kidding. What I do, I just joined a site called Crash Plan, and that is a cloud backup. And they have a lot of different options, whether you can have it run every night, leave your computer on and run by time, or you can do it manually. I do everything manually because I don't leave my gear on overnight. At least most of it I turn off. Yeah, I have that as my secondary backup, and then I have multiple drives in my system. So I have my work drive that is only 250 gigs. I like smaller drives when I'm actually mixing off of them, and I'll have just the projects for the last couple months on that drive. And as soon as I get to a point where I feel like I need to back up something, I'll manually just drag that session to a new drive, to a backup drive I have internally. And once that gets full, I have an 8 terabyte that I hook up. I don't leave it hooked up. I just hook it up when I need to back up. And I do a chrono sync backup to that from the work drive to the 8 terabyte. So I end up having 2 copies, and then the cloud is a third. And eventually, once I run out of space, I start deleting old things off of the work drive. So it ends up going down to 2 copies plus the cloud. So I'm better at it now. I keep everything. I don't delete anything unless the client forces me to. So I have stuff all the way back from 2006. But so that's kind of how I work.
I ask clients at the end of the session, I tell them you're responsible for your files, so we're going to copy them onto your drive. And then I tell them, when you get home, open it up, make sure everything's good on your system, and then shoot me a text and just let me know you're good. And then that way, I don't have that pressure and that responsibility of it being on my shoulders anymore. A lot of times, though, I do have a backup here, and I use Synchronize X Pro when I'm doing backups. And so if it's things like projects that I'm working on or that I'm going to continue to work on, that's what I'll do. Bob and I were just talking about it, so I'm actually glad to hear you did the cloud thing. So I might end up looking into the cloud thing as well. But I definitely have a big 8 terabyte USB 3 drive that I back up all the important stuff that I have to take care of onto that drive. And when drives start acting squirrely and getting unruly, do a final backup and pop them out and put a new drive in and call it good.
Yeah.
The other cool thing about the cloud is that you can access it from any computer. So if you're at home and you're taking the weekend off or whatever, and someone wants a TV mix of a song, you can actually access the cloud, go in and grab that one file and email it to them. And that way you don't have to drive back to the studio if you're in that situation.
Cool. One more question. Do you give clients your Pro Tools sessions that you've done if they request them?
I do, because they can't open it. I mean, they can open it, but they can't make it play. I have too many things that I do. My routing, I have plugins that don't really exist on the market, 1 or 2, not a lot, but it's not probably going to be something that they can play back and do anything with. So I just give it to them. I don't care. I mean, I'm not really worried about them opening my mix and adjusting it and it coming out and me thinking, oh, they ruined it. It's never happened to me that way. With the labels, you have to give them a session. You have to give them stems. You have to give them a whole list of things, or they won't pay you. So no choice with the major labels. But yeah, I kind of don't mind if I have the hunch that they're going to give the song to a different mixer to try a new mix. Then I think at that point I might give them a flat session, just so that guy has to start from scratch. But I mean, in 10 years, that I only think that's happened once or twice. So that's kind of how I treat it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. If I feel like it's a thing where it's going to go out to another mixer, then I'm like, well, I worked, every bit as hard as the next guy to do this, so I'm not going to give you a good starting place. You need to do your own thing anyway, and that's kind of how I feel about it.
Cool. That's it for me. Thank you, guys.
Well, man, good to see you, dude. I love that camera, man. It looks great. Love seeing you.
Right on, thanks.
Yeah.
Ave foray.
All right, Cameron. Anybody who's next? Go ahead, Cameron.
I'll go. Hey, gentlemen. Thanks for doing this. This is awesome. What you're doing kind of ties into my question, which is I've been mixing for a while. Clients are happy, but I feel stagnant. Would you say that being able to have access to each other, or Dave, and that improved your mixing definitely to that next level?
Oh yeah, I mean, because you learn techniques too. Like I'll just tell you flat out, a very specific technique I've incorporated that I learned from Dave, and this was only probably 5-6 months ago. He does this thing where he does a parallel lead vocal. It's a mono aux, puts it right next to lead vocal. He puts a CLA 76 on the bluey mode, the waves one, and then an L1 limiter, and he's got some specific settings for both. The 1176 is smashed, and then the L1 limiter reduces about 2 to 3 dB. So I have that actually set up as something I can import from a template, and I put that with lead vocals when I need just that little extra compression that I'm not getting from the actual channel when I want to do the parallel thing. And I started incorporating that in my mixes, and I totally got that from seeing that in one of his sessions when I was just hanging out in his room. And
Right.
I asked him, "What are you doing there?" And he opened it and showed me, and started doing it that very day. And I do it probably 90% of the time. So yeah, you just having us, in the same building, and just stopping, even guys that aren't in the same building, you stop by your friend's place, and if he's willing to show you things he's doing, you can pick up on that and incorporate things that you like into your own mixing. And I know that's happened with Erik and I.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned so much from having him next door, and it is inspiring. You're kind of like, oh man, I never thought about approaching my drum bus this way, or vocal that way. And it's interesting because you take those things, you sort of start adapting them in your own workflow, and you use them your own way. I was actually a little nervous on the mix that we did together, because I was thinking, oh man, I know you and I have share a lot of the same techniques, and I'm like, man, I sure hope the mixes aren't so similar that when everybody hears it, they're kind of like, but they weren't, and they were 180 degree, crazy different from each other, which was
Because you still bring your own personal interpretation to every mix, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
But even though we're sharing certain techniques, it still ended up being very drastically different mixes, which was
And that was
really
a song
cool.
we produced from the ground up, so
Yeah.
it had even more potential to be similar.
right.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. To that question, I mean,
Yeah,
I
this
think
is a
it's
great concept. I think you could even expand it, and you could do like with someone there in the room. You could really. This is a big concept, I think, to be able to have somebody mentor your mix. I think it's great. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, guys.
Well,
for sure.
and we actually have, it's a comment on the website. If the person that's submitting their mix wishes to remain anonymous, they can, if they feel like we're just going to tear it apart.
yeah.
But hopefully they don't do that, but we are going to end up posting it on YouTube. It'll live there, for eternity, like the internet.
Right.
So if they want to be anonymous, they can. But we certainly will do the same review regardless. So.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, now Eric, all that gear you have in your console.
Yeah.
These plugins are so great. Why do you have all that gear?
Well, major thing for me is the tracking part of it. And sure, I know we've gotten up to a place now where you can track through plugins, and it's really great. But I still like the different options that I get out of having the gear, and also, and this isn't the only reason, but it's one of the reasons. But just being able to dial the sound in without strapping a bunch of plugins across a tracking session and having to deal with latency and this, that, and the other. It makes it easier. And then at that point too, if the session's going to go out because it's going to be given to somebody else, like if we're just doing a drum tracking session and I'm the engineer doing the drums, but then the session's going to go to New York, which this is my scenario tomorrow. I'm going to be doing a drum tracking session where I'm just cutting the drums and then they're going to go cut everything else in New York. If I have plugins on it and I get the drums really sounding great and I want that to reflect me as an engineer and how I've got it tracked, but I send that session out and then they open it up and they're missing 3 or 4 plugins, completely throws off the way that the drums sound when they pulled up in their session. If I track through all my outboard gear, it goes in that way. I get the sound the way I want it right away, and it can go anywhere, and it's going to be that sound no matter what, regardless of plugins. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And do you do much tracking, Bob?
Yeah, actually, I've gotten back into tracking this year. I'm doing a lot of work for Atlantic, so I'm tracking more often at Glenwood Studios over in Burbank. Yeah, I mean, traditionally I'll track people that I used to track years ago, just old clients that are used to me tracking them. I'll still work with them. I tend to stay away from vocal sessions, and usually it's just because I have more mixes to do and they pay more, and it's more what I love to do anyways. But if I'm producing something, I'll gladly produce and record a vocal. But yeah, I mean, I probably do here at the Echo Bar probably a handful of tracking sessions per year. I did one last weekend, drums, bass, guitar, and keys, and probably once every 2 months I'll do a tracking session. And then now with Atlantic, I'm doing a lot more. So
okay. Ken, or hold on one sec. Ben, I called you Ken. Do you have any questions you want to? Sorry about that, Kenny Benny.
Hey, it's good, man. Good to see you, Matt. Thank you guys so much for coming. Can you guys hear me? Getting
yeah.
amazed look. Oh. Echo Bar. Okay, cool, man. I have some questions. So there's a couple things that I struggle with. I'm a producer, musician, mixer. I do a lot of things. I wear a lot of different hats. I do live sound too, front of house, and so I'm constantly having to shift gears. But I've run into a problem a lot, is that basically I love all the music that's ever been created before recording technology existed. I feel like music in the early 1900s was extremely virtual. What's the word?
Virtual.
Not virtual. There was a lot of.
Also,
It really. There was a lot of stress on being a great musician back then. The performance, set a mic up in the room. Louis Armstrong would just go to town. The band would be behind. It would mix themselves practically in the room. So like symphonies, jazz orchestras, Afro-Cuban, African drum ensembles playing, and everything just sounds amazing. There's no recording technology happening. So I don't want to try to live in the glory days, but I get a little bit confused when an artist calls me up and is like, okay, I'm looking for a producer. let me hear some of your material. I want to sound modern. I'm like, okay. I have a hard time understanding what that means. I mean, because if I go on, listen to the radio or go to Billboard and just listen to whatever is current, to me, it's like most of that stuff I wouldn't be like, yeah, I want to produce something that sounds like that. But I don't want to eliminate myself as a producer from being current in the market. But I get confused sort of internally about, what makes something sound modern as opposed to what makes something sound good. And then also, if somebody wants to sound modern, I don't know if I'm making the mistake by thinking this artist is not unique, or like, why would somebody want to sound modern? Why wouldn't they just want to sound good or like themselves? And so,
Right.
So I know you guys are working with a lot of major labels, so there's probably a lot of pressure to sound current or sound modern, but I know it's probably a confusing question, but maybe you could talk on maybe how a producer or mix engineer could sound current without losing their love for just music in general as an art form.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to what you're talking about. I mean, I think, like Eric and I were talking about with the thing we did for Warren Hewart, like we both injected our personality into the mix, but we both were going for a modern mix, something that would work today, on the radio if possible. So I think as far as that part of your question, if you're you and you make things sound like it's gonna be fresh from your perspective. It should be. I mean, as far as making it modern, my take on that is just what's currently out playing on the radio. If you go to Spotify Top 50, if someone says, "Hey, I want a modern production," I'm guessing that they basically kind of want to sound like what's out there on the radio. And a lot of artists and a lot of labels, they just want to recreate what's currently out there, maybe trying to think ahead 6 months a little bit. But I've witnessed so many people be like, "Hey, I need that song like The Weeknd. His song is great. I want to sound like that." Or I need a song like Drake's, One Dance, and I think they do that because they feel it's safe. It'll have an easier chance to get through the DJs. It'll have an easier chance of getting approved by the label. There's A&R people out there that are scared to lose their jobs because their jobs are so fragile. The A&R people shift around labels and lose their jobs all the time. And they don't want to suggest something to the label that isn't going to be successful. So a lot of them fall into this unfortunate thing where they just kind of copy what's already out there. So to me, it's like it's similar drum sound. So right now what's popular, and a while back the trap sound was popular. So everyone was making trap beats. So when someone comes to you as a producer and says, "Hey, I want that modern sound," I think they just really want to sound like everyone else because they feel like that's what will move them forward in their career. That's what will make them successful. And unfortunately, I think it's the opposite. I think it's, you can get on board and start a career that way, but the artists that we all really, really love and the artists that stand the test of time are usually the ones that pop through with something unique. And obviously what happened there was that the label just took a chance. It was just the sun and the moon aligned, and someone said, "Yeah, this doesn't sound like the typical thing out there, but let's go for it." Maybe it sounded enough like it would fit, and they thought that was good to go, and it made its way through. And then next thing you know, you have a new, Amy Winehouse, or one of those really quirky artists, or So I think that's what happens is a lot of people get stuck on just trying to sound current to be safe. It's so hard to break through in the business. That's definitely one angle to attack. It's just doing what everyone else does, and then you can get through a little easier. But it's hard to be unique. It's hard to be more accepted. When you're doing something, and if you go too far left, no one wants to deal with it at all. They're just confused. They don't know where it fits. They're not going to be able to get the radio programmers to get on board. So I think that's what happens. So you just got to decide if it's a gig you want to take or wait for the phone call where they want you to be you, you know?
Well, the few times that I've tried to sound modern, which I never really have, but the few times that I have tried to sound modern, it sounded dated like a month later. You know, it seems like it's like a moving target. There's no real such thing as modern because it's already, you know, it just feels like it changes so rapidly that to be in this business, like at this point at a high level, it seems like you have to be a great imitator all the time, just be constantly imitating.
Yeah.
What?
Well, the other thing that is a little hard to deal with is the top producers and the top artists dictate what the sound of now is. So if you know, No ID does a new Jay-Z album and he's not using any of the drum sounds that are currently on radio, all of a sudden that's okay, and everyone starts to shift. It's like, oh, I wanted to use that No ID snare and kick like he has on that Jay-Z song, and now all of a sudden you have he started a new trend, not even trying, just because it was Jay-Z and it was allowed to get through because he's already Jay-Z. So that happens a lot where a big artist will shift things, or a big producer, and you know, the rest everyone else just has to follow or keep doing the same thing until it's played out. You know?
So right now, to you, what is modern? Like, what are some of the aesthetics that would be not 6 months from now, just like right now? What is it, you know, kind of thing?
It's modern. Like, okay, a song that I think is completely modern right now is "Perfect Pint" by Mike Will. Mike Will made it.
Perfect.
Perfect pint, like pint of beer.
Okay.
So if you look that up on YouTube, it's actually a really cool video. Perfect Pint by Mike Will made it. It's very verbed out, very spacious, a lot of cool sounds. Not traditional drums the whole way through as far as the beat. It's not 1 2 1 2 back and forth. Yeah, it's just atmospheric is what I would call it. It's like urban drums with atmospheric sounds kind of around it, and minimal, like 2-3 sounds on top of the drums, and then the rest is vocals, and not a lot of vocals, not like stacks of background vocals, just the lead. And like Ray Schmerd on there, his vocals like really burped out, and the burp is really cool. You can hear all the detail of the reverb. And one thing I see a lot of producers that aren't, you know, on the charts do mistakenly is overproduce and add way too many tracks. And you know, I would just, my advice to them is like, listen to what's out there, listen to what works, listen to the hits. You know, even over the last 5 years, it's like, you know, sometimes, you know, everyone wants that wall of sound, and they feel like that happens with lots of tracks, and you can do it with minimal tracks, you know. So as far as modern, I think that's my vision of what's modern right now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. You got one, Eric, a song that's like today, right now? No.
Yeah, not necessarily. I think, I don't know, Bob's probably got I think he said all the stuff that matters. I'm thinking more like, I was kind of going back on your question, which was, you know, if like somebody asked me, hey, listen, I'm thinking about hiring you, but I want you to make me sound modern. My thought is like, well, I do what I do. If you want to work with me, then work with me. If you don't want to work with me, then find somebody you do want to work with. And I know that's a little easy way out, but I mean, at the same time, I think all of us always say, we only do what we do. You know, it's all a matter of taste at the end of the day. And when people get to know you, they know your body of work, they will seek you out and just be like, no, I just want to work with you. The ones that are saying, hey, make me sound modern, they haven't studied you yet. You know, they haven't understood what it is that you bring to the table. So at that point, you've got to decide, okay, is this just a money gig for me? Am I just going to take the gig because I'm going to pay the bills? Or do I genuinely see something valuable in this person and their artistry, and I actually want to help develop it, and I want to try and improve on it? So
this particular this particular artist that hit me up to sound like modern was really talented, and she had a really nice budget, so she was shopping around for producers. Then I just keep sending her tracks, and I'm like trying to hit the ballpark on what she was looking for, and then it was just kind of a excuse my language, clusterfuck, so I just kind of let it go. But I don't want to belabor. I have one more question, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, sure.
Can you talk a little bit about compression on vocals as a general concept for tracking and for mixing, especially attack and release settings? I'm trying to get my vocals to sound even, great, but not like lose too much dynamic. And sometimes I don't think my ears are trained well enough to really hear the subtleties on the attack and release. So I'm kind of trying to use my ears, but sometimes I feel like that's a moving target. So if you have any
from a tracking standpoint, one of my favorite types of compressors to use is an opto compressor, something with an opto circuit in it. So right now, and I know I think Dave Foray, he'll comment on it. He knows the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. There's an opto circuit in that, and that's one of my go-to compressors while tracking, just the opto part of it. There's also the Brute, which is a 500 series compressor, which also is an opto circuit.
Inward connections.
Yeah, by inward connections. And I love using those because of it doesn't, to my ear anyway, it doesn't get crazy, and you're not dealing with an attack and release. You're literally just dealing with a threshold and a makeup gain. And at that point, I feel like you can control enough of the peaks once you've tracked it, and then when it comes to injecting some dynamics and some life into the mix part of it, it's been controlled already to a certain extent, and now you've got more, I think you've got more flexibility with riding a fader to really inject where you want crescendos and decrescendos and things like that, you know. So from a tracking standpoint, it does kind of depend on the song too. I think tempo has a big, it's a big component as well. But all in all, at least for me, I love the opto side on that. The Shadow Hills, the mastering compressor, it's been a workhorse for me when it comes to tracking vocals, and I can put it through its paces on a lot of different types of music, whether it's a fast-paced rap vocal or even a slow female ballad, anything like that. Always kind of works really great. It gets me to a good starting point before the mix.
About 3 dB of compression, you smash it. It all depends on what you're looking for.
It depends. I just finished up Rasan Patterson's record, and he is one of the most dynamic vocalists I've ever worked with, because he's so talented, but he can go from a super high falsetto all the way down to really low bass notes. I mean, that's his range. And then he also, in the middle of a vocal, he'll be singing a verse where he's interchanging between a very quiet, subtle to a belty, really loud part. You know, he ramps up in those places. So on a situation like that, I've definitely had the opto compressor pushing 10, 15 dB of compression, you know, crazy, like heavy compression on it. And it's one of those compressors where you don't hear it pumping and breathing type thing. It does what it needs to do. And then when it comes mix time, I'll say this, a lot of times with breaths in between words and things, the breaths will end up being a lot more exaggerated because of all the compression. So a lot of times I'll have to go in and ride down some breaths just so that it doesn't sound like super loud intake of air in between, you know, these, yeah, just like that. So yeah, I mean, things like that, you know, you have to get in and work with, I think, your fader rides too, but everybody's got their own process, but that's one way that I do it. I really enjoy it.
That's awesome.
I think a lot of people get scared when you say 10, 15 dB of compression, but you got to realize the amount of peaks, like on an instrument, on a vocal. The dynamics are insane. They can be 30 dB going from a verse to a chorus, you know, certain transients on the vocal. And a lot of people don't think of a vocal as transient, but it definitely is. It can be. There's softer transients, but they're there, and they can you can definitely have peaks jump up, like I said, like 30 dB or so. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of the compressors we all love aren't that transparent. So, you might do 10 dB with one and 5 dB with another, and then the vocals the loudest thing in your mix, so then your 2 bus is doing another 2 dB, and then on top of that, you're doing fader rides. If you were to add all that up, you're controlling that vocal up and down upwards of 20 to 30 dB anyways. So as long as you're not creating bad artifacts with the compressor, there's nothing wrong with doing huge amounts of reduction. I definitely do. I feel like I've gotten very, very good with compression on vocals, and I'll use multiple compressors. Very fast release, which is very fast release on vocals is dangerous as well, because like Erik said, when that compression releases, especially if you're doing, 7 to 12 dB of reduction, when the breaths and the S's, they don't get knocked down by the compression because they're so small frequency wise. The loudest part of the signal is always low end. So you go from your low end to your mid range to your high end. The breaths and the S's get through. So now when the release comes back up, they're getting through 7 to 10, 12 dB louder. So you effectively turn up all your mouth noises and your breaths 12 dB. So like Erik said, if you use fast release on your vocal compression and you do a lot of reduction, you need to control all that stuff with the fader. So I do a lot of fader work as well as a lot of compression. And I'm able to put the vocals anywhere I want, front, back, all that stuff. So
releasing a lot on vocals?
All the time. I never use a long release on a vocal. I will if I want to move a background vocal behind a lead vocal, but still have it kind of loud, I will use a medium release on a background vocal, and that actually holds it visually. If you're talking about the speaker placement, that can push a vocal back. If you take something like the I mentioned earlier, the CLA 76 by Waves, put your release all the way to the left, which is actually the slowest, and crush your vocal 5 to 10 dB. And then while it's sitting in the mix, start turning that release. Just turn it all the way to the right, which is the fastest setting. And you'll see that vocal move in the speaker image. It'll just come right up front. So that's how I do all my vocals. But because I do a lot of reduction, I have to do a lot of cleanup with the fader, with all the artifacts but I don't mind doing that extra work because the sound is in your face, and that's how I really like vocals to be.
Doesn't Isotope Nectar make like a debreather? Do you ever use that?
I don't mess with that stuff. I'm kind of a control freak, and I want to be in control of all that stuff, like the vocal riders and the debreathers. They're imperfect, and I have to go through and check them and make sure that they did everything the way I want it to. So it's kind of a two-step process. I'd rather just grab the fader and do it myself, or draw it in with the pencil tool on the fader. So yeah, I like to just be in control and do it myself. Same with dynamics. I will obliterate a vocal to where it just sits right on the mix with not a lot of dynamics, but then I will use the fader to put the dynamics back in. And someone might say that that's silly. Why don't you just let the vocalist be dynamic? But I'm doing maybe different dynamics than the singer did. A lot of singers they don't work the mic like in the old days, and they need more dynamics. So once I get the vocal where I can control it and it's not moving, then I move it with the fader. And the music these days is so loud and compressed, the vocal is hard to compete with a large track with lots of drums and lots of synths going on. So to me, that all that compression and then using the fader to put the vocal where it needs to be is it's important.
And last thing is the attack. How do you approach attack on a lead vocal, both for track?
Fairly fast, medium to fast. On something like an 1176 effect compressor, I'll go medium, because each compressor has its own speed anyway. So if you use something like an LA2A, which has no attack adjustment, just know that it's most of them are between 20 and 40 milliseconds. Just in general, there's no adjustment, but on like a slower compressor that has a attack adjustment, I'll use a faster attack time. On something super fast like a vac rack or an 1176 medium time. And if you're too slow, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're gonna have to do a lot more compression to get the job done. And if it's too fast, it's just gonna sound smashed and ugly. So finding that sweet spot.
And then when you finally get all of your vocals, let's say you have 3 vocalists on a track, or a featured artist, and you have some backgrounds, and you kind of do a pass and watch the meters and try to make all your vocals sort of, make sure that you're not missing anything, or are you just using your ear?
I don't watch the meters because one thing that people, for what you're talking about, I don't watch the meters. Okay. Because one thing people forget about is that vocals contain so many frequencies. They go all the way down to 60 hertz, and they go all the way up to above 20K with the air. They encompass the entire frequency range. But you take a female that's belting on a bridge, and most of that energy is around 2K, and then later on when she's on the verse, most of the energy is around 200 hertz. The meter is only showing you one thing, and she could have a proximity effect, like a low vocal kind of thing that will make the meter jump louder. And it doesn't mean that the vocal's suddenly louder. It's just that frequency range is louder. So the meter does you no good in that aspect. Trying to match them, you'll probably end up in more trouble than.
Awesome, that's really helpful.
So you gotta listen to the speakers low, and just do it that way. So you got the first verse with the one singer, the second verse with one singer, and the bridge is a rapper. So you got 3 people, and just play a little bit of the first verse and jump to the second verse and adjust the fader to match. Whichever one you like the most, start with that one. So you like the first verse where you got the vocal, cool. Now let's match up the rap in the second verse for that. So play a little of the first verse, jump to the second, match it. Also to listen to the dynamics. Maybe the second verse isn't as compressed as the first. Maybe the first one is too compressed, and you got to loosen that up a little bit, and then move the faders, match them a little bit. Now jump to the rap, make that match. Rap and vocals are kind of hard sometimes to match because they're so different. Especially if some rappers they're yelling, some rappers are soft and they talk like Drake. Drake is so soft on the mic, and but he's so in your face on his records the way they mix them. So that can be a real trick. So just jumping back and forth, a few seconds of the rap, adjust the fader, a few seconds of this verse, and then just try to match everything that way. And then same thing with your backgrounds. But I find listening low on your speakers is the best way to line up your vocals, volume wise.
Do you have an SPL that you recommend, or just low?
No, just whatever is comfortable for you to still hear all the words, and I go pretty dang low. I kind of check all over with the speakers, but when I'm doing my vocal rides, I kind of pick one area and stick to it, and it's usually fairly low.
I'm mixing for an artist right now that used to work with Bobby McFerrin, and he wants, like, every time I do a mix for this guy, he wants to kind of have the acapella mix, mute all the instruments. He wants that to be like the Bible of the mix, so that it sounds amazing without any instrumentation. And that's awesome. I love that approach. But then the moment I put the music back in, it screws everything up, because I feel like it doesn't hold.
Well, let me ask you, did you start with the music, or did you start with the vocals when you were mixing?
Well, I always start with the music and the vocals. I always kind of just do a quick mix and get everything where I like it.
Okay.
And mix the tune, and then for this particular client, I got to kind of mute the music and then kind of refine the acapella mix. And then when I bring the music back in, it never really adds up,
Yeah. What I would do with that particular client is mix it as an acapella and get it done, and maybe get it pretty close, and then put in a couple things. Put in kick and snare, or the main drums, the bass, if there's a bass, and then one main instrument, and add that in and get that sounding good with the acapella. And once you have that where you love it, then mix in all the other stuff while all that's going on. I think that'll help a lot. You know, one thing I should mention, if you're mixing a genre that's not radio, not pop radio, a lot of that compression stuff I was talking about might go out the window, and you might have to work the fader a lot and leave the vocal a lot more natural. Maybe do a lot less compression, 2 to 3 dB on, you know, if you got like a nice tube compressor, LA2A or CL1B or something, and you might just have to move the fader around a lot. I think a lot of people these days are forgetting about the faders, and they just try to do everything with the plugins. And you know, you can really adjust the emotion and make something captivating, you know, moving those faders around.
Man, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time. That was awesome.
No problem. Like your T-shirt.
Well, I love AC/DC, and I read Rick Rubin's autobiography. And
Nice.
have you read that by any chance?
No.
That's a great book, and he was talking about hip hop records. He just tried to make every early hip hop record sound like AC/DC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was really crazy because I never thought of AC/DC having anything to do with the birth of like mainstream hip hop. But now when I went back and listened to a lot of those early Run DMC records, Beastie Boys records, and LL Cool J, he's trying to get those guitars to sound like what's his name?
Yeah.
Angus Young.
Angus Young.
There he is.
AC/DC is dun, right? Dun, that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All those
Hell yeah. Yeah. That sound is loud in your face. Like they tell us, why are you guys mixing for loud? Man, I like that sound. Like that AC/DC stuff, Back in Black, right?
Yeah, Back in Black and Highway to Hell and all that stuff, but those guitars were bone dry, like just dry and in your face.
That is a sound that a lot of us hip hop people like. Loud in your face, and it moves us. So I could see where he would say that, bro.
But check out the dynamic range of those albums compared to what's out today too.
Speak on it.
They were a lot. They had a lot more dynamic range back then than they do today, and those albums rock. The AC/DC stuff, the Rage Against the Machine first album, you know, all that stuff. It wasn't mastered extremely loud, and it fucking rocks. And we've lost a lot of the dynamics in the music that's being put out today, which is, I don't know, it's kind of sad. I guess the streaming platforms are starting to interject the levels that they want to play the music back at, but the mastering engineers are still being asked to squash everything really, really loud. But man, go back and listen to those old albums with a lot of dynamic range, and they rock, man. They're awesome.
Yeah, the Taylor Swift record is louder than the AC/DC record. It's mastered hotter.
Yeah. I don't know if a lot of you guys know this, but iTunes is about to go to -16 LUFS, and Spotify is going to go to -14. That's going to be their standard. So anyone making super loud -5 EDM records, their stuff's going to start to sound horrible because it'll have to be turned down so much. So it's a word of caution out there.
I think mastering engineers are going to have to make two formats. I think for the ones that want it loud on the CD, they're going to have to make one version, and then one for streaming. It'll have to be a different version.
Did you say CD? What's a CD?
I just bought some
compacted discs.
I'm over here looking for Jay-Z's new album on CD, even though I know it's not on CD.
It's at Target. It's at Target. I saw it.
Yeah.
You saw Jay-Z's new album?
It's at Target.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm getting it today on CD. No offense or buts. Because you know what? That Compton album that Dre did for the movie, when we listened to it in the studio, I hated that sound. It was killing my ears. And DJ Kui over here was like, "Oh, I love it." I couldn't stand it. Dre stuff for the first time was hurting my ears. And somebody said we might have been streaming it at a low kbps, whatever it was, a low bit rate. But so I want I trust the CDs. I want CDs of everything. I don't trust streaming at all.
It still sounds crispy and crunchy on CD though. It's definitely brighter than any of the stuff he's done before.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna try to get that too. Because I just ran to the store looking for a Katy Perry. She had a new hit on the radio. I can't remember what it was. And it might have been whatever you guys just said. And I was running around looking for it on CD, and they're like, "Nah, the album's not out, so you have to, it's just streaming." And I'm so old school with that. It's frustrating to me to not be able to immediately get stuff on CD. So I'm running to get that new Jay-Z on CD, which I was about to ask about. But first, Bunny he was talking about film. What were you saying, Bunny? About vocals and film and whatever?
Yeah, so I was just curious, like, if you take a different approach when it comes to something you think is right for a movie or like a TV show compared to something you think for the radio. Are you trying to get a different sound for those?
I haven't done a lot of film work. I've had songs that ended up in films, and so has Erik, but they were just taken off the CDs, after they came out, years later and put in the movie. Erik did some TV work for the show Anger Management with Charlie Sheen. And that stuff was way different than pop radio.
Yeah, and I actually was just hanging out with my neighbor he actually does quite a bit of work for Warner Brothers, all in the film department. And he was telling me, I went over to his place of work because I was just fascinated I wanted to kind of address that and see, like, okay, what are kind of some of the differences here in terms of mixing approach? And in their world, at least what on his day today, when they're mixing, whether it's trailers for movies or adding songs in, he got some kind of a remix from Imagine Dragons for the Wonder Woman promo for the movie being introduced. And his whole thing, he was telling me, was they can't seem to get it bright enough. Low end to them in terms of that realm, and getting those things out the door isn't nearly as much of a consideration as how bright it can be. He's saying that constantly their directors and the departments are always coming down and saying, it doesn't sound, it sounds a little too dark. Can we brighten it up some more, and they're constantly just adding top end to that stuff, is the way he was putting it to me. So definitely a different approach, but in my experience being over there, I realized, wow, it really is a whole different world. I mean, we're using some of the same tools, Pro Tools, we're using some of the same plugins and so on and so forth, but that approach is very much different, I think. So I don't know if that really answered your question or not, but
yeah, that does, because I think it could get really muddy, like with others.
Yeah.
I can add something to that. I got a friend who's kind of mentored me a little bit, and he's in the film and TV. He's a composer for film and TV, and he kind of hit me to a little bit of the game. And to them, it's all about, at least from what he told me, it's all about sound alike. So when they get a supervisor, they say, hey, I want this kind of chase scene, the suspenseful sound, and I want it to sound like this track. They're always using reference material. So when you're mixing a track or you're producing a track for film and TV, you've got to kind of know what the music supervisor wants it to sound like. And if you deliver that to them quickly, then they get in the film and you're good to go. So they kind of have an idea of, it could be a top 40 song, it could be a hit song, it could be a song from 20 years ago. It all depends on the emotion of the scene. So I don't think there's a standard. It's whatever the music supervisor thought when they were putting that rough cut together. They put what's called temp music in there. So they might, they're cutting a film and they go, oh, this kind of song by Rihanna would sound good there, and they actually pop it in the score, or you know, some classical music. So if you're doing music for film and TV, it's good to have a direct link with the music supervisor and understand what the temp music was that he was hearing instead, and just try to get it to sound as close to that reference track as you can. And it could be all over the map.
And also know that you'll have to do stems. You had to deliver in stems when you work. I do a little bit of that work myself, so it's a little bit different. But in terms of, if you're talking about the mix, though, I still kind of approach, well, if it's a song for a film, or I still approach that mix like I would a normal song. If it's sound effectsy stuff, then that's a different thing. And what he said about, you know, working with the music supervisor obviously helps a lot. But they get addicted to their temp tracks. That's, as a composer, the problem is if they're using temp tracks, then you feel like you're just trying to make something that sounds like, but that they can get away with legally. And that's questionable sometimes. So, but work with the director and the supervisor. They'll let you know.
I couldn't believe it. The guy auditioned me to do a thing, and he said, "Hey, here's sound like this." He sent me a track. It was like a kind of a, what's it called, a Jason Bourne kind of chase scene with the Middle Eastern flavor or whatever. And he said, make it sound kind of like it. So I did this whole spread and I sent it to him, and I thought it was the best thing. And he said, what did you do, man? I said, sound like it. And I was like, it kind of sounds like it, doesn't it? He's like, no. And he wanted, like, not verbatim, but really close to what it was. I mean, the arrangement, he wanted me to basically plagiarize it. So
Under Pressure versus Ice Ice Baby.
yeah, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
When Eric and Bob, when they put your songs in movies or whatever, did it actually sound different to you? Like somebody went in and touched it, or did it just sound like they placed it in there?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had both instances where it sounded untouched, and then also when it was just ruined, like severe compression added that was totally unnecessary, EQ, stereo widening that was unnecessary. Unfortunately, every engineer, I mean, there's when you add in the TV and film world, there's so many of us, and we all have our own opinions of what we should do and not do, and some people just can't resist touching something and thinking they're doing the right thing. But yeah, I had a couple things ruined. They're actually TV commercials, Super Bowl commercials, and yeah, but everyone's gonna do what they do, so it's unavoidable.
You look like you took that personal.
Oh yeah, I was upset. Worked hard for days and days, and then it comes out, and you have no control over fixing it, you know. So as long as it got through past the director and the producers, that's what it was, you know. So it's unfortunate.
Now Bunny here, I swear I hate calling the guy Bunny. You might have to call him B or something, like. So anyway, so like he said, I think before we started to hang out, I met him at the Pier, Santa Monica Pier. He was singing. The next time Mentors Lab is done, he's one of the guys that I want to come in. He has a real deep, manly voice, and it was just him and the guitar, no plugins, nothing. And I was like, damn, this sounds good. Just no tricks. Just, it's like, this must be what they be talking about right here. And so I hooked up with him immediately. But anyway, so Bunny, these are some of the guys when I met you. When I was saying, when I got to get you to meet the guys, and like, anyway, these are some of the guys I was talking about right here.
Bring them over.
Oh shit! Here we go.
Come on over.
You hear that, Bunny? He must have I don't know. He done logged out or something. Oh, I got a message saying I will be right back. Battery low. Okay. So his screen is frozen. He'll be back whenever he gets up. But hell yeah, Cameron. I'll bring him over, and because I have a lot to learn as far as when it comes to singers that have experience, can work the mic right, and sound good with no plugins. The one person that I know who's just that awesome to me is Keisha Burns out here. Like she just is just wow, is all I can say with her. But other than that, it's a lot of tricks and working real hard and that asking Brad Chapman what to do. So anyway, on this this Jay-Z album that a lot of people are beating up, I like well, hold on, I've only listened to one, and that's the OJ, and that was on YouTube, and I liked it. I saw it with the video, so I was influenced by the video. Without the video, I might be sitting there beating it up, but with that video with Nina Simone in there and blah blah blah, that thing really touched me. I'm loving the sound. I'm playing it in the car, and they're saying, oh, it's retro, it's this, it's that. All I know is when music touches me, I don't give a damn about none of that. Does it make me feel something? You guys, what did you guys actually? Well, I shouldn't ask you that because you guys might have to do some work for Jay-Z, and I might mess up that opportunity.
No, that's all right.
Huh?
No, go ahead.
I was about to ask you, what did you guys think when you heard it? Because Jimmy Douglas mixed it, and I really liked that one song. Like, I haven't heard the whole thing, but what did you guys think of what you heard? What did you hear or whatever?
I actually loved the mix. I like how dark it is. I think it sounds really cool. And I like how it's, I don't know, it's got a great vibe and everything's placed perfectly in my opinion. I think it's really cool.
Eric?
Haven't heard it.
A lot of the mixes that out here, they hurt my ears. It's stuff that's jabbing me, and I was blasting that thing, and it felt good and wasn't.
Yeah, that mix,
so.
that Story of OJ mix will never hurt your ears. It's too dark. Even the snare is dark, but it's done in a really cool way. I think it's cool. I've also only heard that one song. I haven't had time to go through the whole album. I like the mix on it.
I'll have the album today. Now, Manny has come in, and is Thomas still in here? Oh, Thomas already left. Thomas Hornick. I was hoping to get to him. Manny, unmute yourself. Say hello.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
Hey.
Yeah.
You paid to go to that class, so hit these guys up with some questions.
All right, cool. What's going on, brother?
How's it going? How you doing?
Good, man. Before I got in the room, I was recording my cousin a couple minutes ago, and he just left. So Mahat sent me a message, and I promised him I was going to get in the Google Hangout. So I'm like 3 hours behind you guys. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, so yeah.
So hit him with some questions.
Let me see.
They might have a little bit of experience and be able to answer. They might.
How do you guys handle I guess like low end stuff like 808 sub basses and stuff like that?
To me, it depends on the context. Like if that's the only thing in if it's being used like a rhythm section, that's one thing. But sometimes 808s get used like a bass instrument because they change pitch. Mm-hmm. So it can be used more from a melodic standpoint. So sometimes that it depends. But if it's an 808 that's complementing another kick drum, kind of depends on, I guess, the taste. Like if the producer really is like, no, feature the 808 more and just put the kick back a little bit for more, just a little bit of the attack sound. I just want a little bit of click or a little bit of attack. It's a balance thing for me at that point. And the low end of the 808 probably ought to ring out. That's probably what you ought to hear more than anything else. So it wouldn't necessarily make a lot of sense to go in and start cranking up a bunch of low end on the other kick sound, maybe, if you're featuring the 808. It's really contextual. It's kind of hard to answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, it also depends if the 808 needs to be loud or let me say, if the sustain of the 808 needs to be loud, then I might have to go on with some compression, maybe with some saturation. Some 808s sound really cool if they're a little bit distorted. if the 808 needs to be a little more pure sounding, then it's all about level to me. And at that point, I just kind of reference some records, anything from like Jason Derulo, Talk Dirty, like that low end is really loud. I think they're 808s in that song, but it's like really upfront and in your face. So that's a good reference to use, just to get your level. And yeah, I tried not to compress them unless they have to cut through a lot of stuff in a big production. If it's a hip hop track where everything's open and there's less tracks, then I usually try to leave them natural and just find the right volume. Sometimes I'll play with filters, like filtering the low end at like 40 or 45 hertz. Sometimes I can tighten them up, but if you don't do an extreme slope, if you do like 6 dB per octave, you're not really cutting that much off. You're just kind of tightening it a little bit. But to me, it's all about referencing, just to get the low end right. You know, make sure you don't have too much or too little. Checking it on little speakers, iPhone, iBud headphones. I said iBuds.
You did.
Earbuds. Earbuds. They should make iBuds.
They should.
That's a good product. Yeah. iBuds. Yeah, checking it on earbuds, little speakers, big speakers, just to get it right. I mean, I don't put a lot of plugins on 808s because the more you mess with them, they tend to just sound worse and worse. And the tail, the way it decays, is so important.
Yeah.
Unless you purposely want to mangle that, it's just best to leave it natural, I think.
I've had some instances where the tail actually gets in the way. It's too long, so it carries over and it'll cover up something else, like the start of another bass note, or get in the way of some type of a low-end synth. So I'll gate it just to shave off the decay. I'll actually play with the gate on like an SSL, you know, and really play with the speed with which that gate decays, and just make the 808 just truncate it a little bit, but it still sounds like a natural fade on it, you know, and that way you can get it out of the way of something else that's getting ready to come in, maybe on a big hit, a downbeat, something where the rhythm part of the component is important. And you've got this low end smear blocking out something that's supposed to punch and hit. A lot of times you can play with a gate on the tail end of it and just shave how quickly it decays at the very end. You know?
Okay, cool. Now, I got another question for you guys. Have y'all ever had any issues with getting stems from like producers or beat makers and trying to, like, I guess, sonically kind of beat their 2-track?
In that instance, usually it's level. Sometimes I'll get a rough mix that's really distorted because it's so loud, and I don't want the final mix to be distorted at all. You know, so sometimes their level is like 2-3 dB hotter than mine, and sometimes I just worry that the client is going to compare that to my mix and think that the louder is better. So I run into that sometimes, but as far as getting stems from a producer, every once in a while I'll get something where they combine like the kick and the snare, and I'll ask them if they have them separate. It happens less and less nowadays, but, you know, 10, 15 years ago, we'd run into this thing where the producer would do a drum mix on an MPC and print it out stereo, and that's all you would have. And he just had this feeling of, well, that's my drum mix, and I want it to be like that, and I don't want to change. And that's the wrong approach, because if you want it a certain way, come to the mix and make sure it's that way.
Right.
Give me the 2-track mix, and I'll compare it. I'll make sure it matches. But I still need that control for unforeseen reasons. I mean, every mix is different. You might run into something where you want to add a bunch of low end to the kick to make it bigger because it wasn't as big as you thought it was in the rough mix. But now you're adding all that low end to the snare and shakers and everything else that's in that mix, and it kind of ruins it. So having things separated on stems is important to me. So I always appreciate when guys give me control over everything, you know, rather than trying to protect it. Because if they're the ones that are in charge, they're the producers. it's going to be right in the end, you know, so they don't have to anything to worry about.
Gotcha. That's what I've been trying to get in the habit of doing, is sending off the all the tracks. And it's tedious, but, you know, I mean, I'd rather have it sounding sonically, you know, the best possible compared to just a 2-track and everything's all like hyper compressed and all that. I've been trying to tell a lot of the artists in the area to try to do that too, try to get the stems from their producers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you mix an instrumental, those vocals aren't covering things up. So even if someone asks me to mix a 2-track and vocals, I usually turn it down because my name's on it and I have no control over the instrumental. And when you all of a sudden lay vocals on top of a 2-track, they just kind of sit on top and they don't sound like they're part of the same song. You need to be able to get in there and move things around, and things in an instrumental will get lost. Like you'll have a cool guitar part and they mixed it when they did the 2-track production, but now that you got the vocals in there, you can't hear that guitar anymore. And you wish you could turn it up, but you can't. So stems are important. And I actually don't even, everyone calls them stems. I think of stems when I print the final mix. Yeah. And I got to do like movie stems or stems for a live show. I just call it the multi-track. Yeah. That makes more sense to me. But yeah, getting the multi-track or stems from the producer, I think is, and having everything separated, not having verb on stuff. I did a mix, major label mix. I had to do for Lupe Fiasco, and they would not give us the vocal without reverb because they just loved their reverb. But the vocal was really dynamic, and we needed to compress it to match Lupe's vocals. So it made the reverb sound all funky. So then I had to go through with the fader and even it out, do all this weird stuff. So I don't know why they just didn't trust us to recreate the reverb or put another reverb on it. So that was kind of a bummer because I think it hurt the mix at the end. It still made it sound good, but maybe it could have been a little bit better, you know?
Gotcha.
You all good, Manny? No more questions?
Yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
You're supposed to stump these dudes.
Can I sneak one in there?
Yeah.
What?
Can I sneak another one in there?
Go ahead, bro.
All right, cool. As far as high end on your mix, okay. Do you ever run your final mix through a stereo EQ, or there's a 2-part question. Do you ever put a little sizzle on there or a little whatever you're feeling to get it to sound how you envision it? A. B, if you don't and you send it to mastering, you kind of have to tame some of your high end and envision how it's going to sound when they put some air on it, or how do you kind of deal with that final sizzle on a record?
Yeah, I definitely do. At the end of the mix, there is a stereo EQ, at least on my master bus. There's lots of things on it, but as far as high end is concerned, it's going to be real subtle if I add it with an EQ. We're maybe dB and a half, maybe 2, you know, maybe a shelf, but sometimes I'll end up doing that, and I'll go back and I'll be like, okay, I just raised a shelf at, you know, 10K, 12K on my mix, and I just bumped it up, you know, a dB. And then that'll actually reveal to me some other things. I'm like, oh, well, now this is a little too bright. Maybe the hat's a little too bright, or the S's need to be de-essed even more on my vocals. So I almost use it sort of like a way of determining if anything else is going to jump out by adding some of that extra brightness. It kind of helps me go back and refine a few things a little bit more. But every now and then I do put it on there, and I'm like, yeah, actually, a little bit of top end sounds okay, and everything still feels balanced and even the way that I like it. So, yeah, another way to achieve it too is using some of the saturation plugins out there too, which it's another way of adding some harmonic content into the into your whole mix, which is, it's not the same thing as like grabbing an EQ and boosting high end, but you're achieving some of those results in the same kind of way. So I don't know, that's me. Bob, I know, has a big take on the master bus process as well.
Yeah, when I mix, I treat it as if the song is not going to get mastered. So I'm also the mastering engineer. So when my client gets that first mix, it's as loud as I can possibly get it to still sound good, because I don't like over squashed mixes. But I do recognize that I have to compete with the other, songs that are out there on the market. So I treat myself as I'm also the mastering engineer at the same time that I'm mixing. So I do all the EQ, I do all the limiting, anything I'm gonna do on the master bus to have a final song, I do right there in the mix, and I get it done. And I've actually had some songs not go to mastering, and I was even asked ahead of time to make sure I do that kind of thing. But the reason I do that is because I want the client to hear a finished product, and a lot of times they're going to put it in iTunes next to finished songs. They're going to compare it to their favorite song of the moment. And if I sound lower in level, if I sound not as bright, not as polished, it's if they're not techies like us, if they're not engineers, they're not going to get it. They're just going to feel like it's not as good as it could be. And I want to hit a home run, so I go ahead and master the song myself, but I don't do it as a separate process. I do it right there in the mix. And then as far as delivering it to mastering, now that I'm done with the client and they're listening, and now it's time to send to mastering, I have a final output knob. I will back that down about 8 dB, and nothing before, it's the last thing in my plug-in chain on the master bus. So if I have a tape simulator and an EQ and a saturator, maybe I have an HG2 plugin or a compressor, none of that stuff is affected. I don't lower the level and mess with the threshold of the compressor. This is after everything. After all the plugins, I turn the volume down 8 dB. So all the compression is the same. I'm just not hitting 0 as hard as I was before. And then I give that to the mastering engineer. But I also give the mastering engineer my loud version that the client approved, because that way the mastering engineer can be sure to compare it and either match my volume, or if they're going to make it louder than what I had, they can go ahead and do that. But at least it doesn't come back quieter or way off the mark from what the client approved. Because a lot of clients, once the mix is done, they're not envisioning what mastering is going to do to it. They just know that it has to get mastered because that's what you do. So I don't want it coming back, even if it's better, I don't want it coming back drastically different. Most of my masters I get back from mastering engineers, you have to A/B to hear a difference because they're really close. So the last probably 6 years, I've been approaching it like that.
So that makes amazing sense to me from a business perspective, but I like to make the client happy for sure. But then isn't it like kind of like potentially compromising the final product because you're missing getting that other person's perspective on the mix, like giving them a little wiggle room to add some flavor?
Well, that's why I lower it 8 dB. Because once I lower it, I get my level by pushing 0 and technically clipping. I don't do it with a compressor like an SSL or something like that. So when I back off the volume 8 dB, it's released all that limiting. The limiting is done by pushing into 0 really hard.
So are you saying? So the attenuating is not happening after a limiter?
Right, exactly. I don't use brick wall limiters. I hate them. I actually go above 0. I clip. Clipping is the most natural form of limiting. And I know a lot of old school engineers would just cry at that statement. But you can ask mastering engineers do the same thing. A lot of them. Brick wall limiters they limit you at wherever you set that ceiling. So -0.1, whatever you do. basically right next to 0, and everything above that is shaved off. If you let your sound hit 0, and it's controlled, your mix is done, you don't have things jumping out wildly. So you're hitting 0, but you're going over 0 a little bit. As long as you're oversampling, a lot of plugins have oversampling now, and you can do 16 times or 64 times, depending on what you're doing. If you're going over 0, but not an extreme amount, like I think Pro Tools, I don't know if it's changed at all, but it has an insane amount of headroom before it distorts. So it's really hard to distort a master fader in Pro Tools, even though the red lights are on. What you're going to distort first is your actual converters. So like I have Apogee D to A converters. The distortion is going to happen on those, not on the DAW. So when I bounce the song, it'll be okay, most likely no matter what. It's really the playback interface that will be the problem, because that technology hasn't been upgraded yet above 0. So as long as I'm not hearing it through my Apogees, it's not distorted, even if those lights are clipping. If I don't hear distortion, it's not there. It technically is square waving some things, but I will import my bounce and look at the kick drums and see what they look like, and then make a decision. Well, what does that sound like? Does it still sound good, or is it ruining the kick drum? Is it ruining my low end? The first thing to go is going to be your low end, most likely, at least the way I mix. So I love low end. I don't want to ruin it. So I clip to get my level. So in turn, when it goes to mastering, I've turned it down about 8 dB. I'm no longer clipping. The master engineer gets it. He's got 8 dB or so or more to do his thing. He can EQ, he can compress, he can DS, whatever he wants to do, and then raise the level back up himself. But he's got my loud reference to listen to how I had things living. Because one thing about when you're clipping, some of the levels in your mix are now dependent upon that ceiling. So things are sitting a certain way. So I include my loud reference so that he knows how I was feeling. And it hasn't failed me.
Your loud reference is brick walled, or no? You don't use that?
Not brick walled. It's just clipping, basically.
Okay.
So,
got it. So
probably,
you never feel like, man, I'm going to leave the final EQ of my mix to a mastering engineer, or you do?
No, well, he does add EQ. A mastering engineer is always going to add EQ. So, but it's subtle. It's like 0.5 dB, at 2K, and little tucks and little adjustments here and there. Rather than 15 years ago when I mixed on the SSL, I'd turn in a track that was 20 dB low, and it was a little bit on the warm side, a little bit muddy in the low mids, and they'd have to go in and carve on it and brighten it and compress it and do a lot. And the thing that would happen is the mix would come back and it would be like, oh, that doesn't really sound like me anymore. And sometimes it was better, sometimes it was worse. More often it was worse. Nowadays, with the approach that I use, it comes back and sometimes you can hardly hear a difference. And like I said, you gotta put them both next to each other and A/B it. And like, oh yeah, okay, so he opened up the high end just a touch, and it sounds like maybe he's got a little bit of compression on there that I didn't have. So it's better because the client hears it, it's finished, it's polished. The mastering engineer has done his thing, he's approved it. He had his headroom to work on it, and but he didn't have to do anything drastic.
That's cool. And since you're doing that extra work, making it sound extra good for the client, do you ask for a turkey sandwich with avo or something?
I don't like avocado except with chips and salsa.
A bag of chips for doing the extra love on the track, or?
No, it's just part of my process, and really, it's for me. It's. I mean, it is for them so that they don't think the mix is worse when they compare it to Drake or something like that. But it's also for me, so I know that the song is going to go out exactly how I want it, and that way, to myself, I can say when that song is out in the public, it's like, okay, that is my mix. The mastering didn't have to help me oodles and noodles and tons and tons to make it sound good. I made it sound good,
Hardware? Do you use any hardware on your master bus?
Not lately. I used to use the HG2 black box on my 2 bus. Now I use that on my guitar bus if the song has guitars. sometimes on a keyboard bus. But the only outboard I've been using lately that stays live on my mix is my Bricasti reverb. I have some compressors that I'll use on individual tracks, but I'll print them. I'll commit them so that they become a permanent part of the session, so I don't have to recall them. So my Bricasti just recalls with the session, and that's it right now.
And last question, I promise. Background vocals, R&B, really female background vocals where you just get that just airy, just amazing quality that you hear on some records. Do you have any tricks on how to see, like maybe on your background vocal aux track, or just any tips on trying to get that? It might even be kind of 80s, what I'm hearing in my head, but you know, some of those Mariah records, like
to achieve that air,
achieve that just like crystallized back quintessential R&B background vocal female. Do you have any?
A lot of times, to me, I have to control that air because it seems like they have so much of it coming from the tracking phase. I used to add it, but it seems like last few years I'm more containing it. But everything's getting brighter and brighter these days. You know, recordings, everything. So a lot of times I have to contain the high end more than add it. But if I had a really warm vocal and I wanted more of that air, it's all about above 20K, like shelf. Like,
I probably shouldn't have used the word air, because just general tips on that kind of sound. That I meant airy.
Lush backgrounds.
Lush backgrounds, yeah.
To me, it's just cool verbs and little delays inside the verbs and panning things wide, maybe even using wideners. I don't mind background vocals going beyond, 100 and 100 left and right, Erik just mixed Rasan Patterson's record, which had a lot of backgrounds. What were some of the things you did?
Yeah, kind of to me, a lot of it is with the ambience that you put around them. Because even though his vocals, we all cut in just the same booth, so whether it was a background vocal or a lead vocal, and he's really good with working the mic, like he knows how to do that. So that's a luxury for me in a situation like that. But it does come down to the ambience that you put around them, the verbs, and how you mix in delays or chorusing effects or doubling effects, things like that. To me, that was kind of my approach on the Rasan record.
You know what I see that I consider a mistake a lot is people sending all of their backgrounds to one aux and EQing them together and compressing together and de-essing them together. And I know why they're doing that, because it saves a lot of time. But vocals, they're not one. If you take 16 vocals, it's not just a stereo thing. It's like, yeah, you got to pan left and right. But let's say you have 4 stacks of a melody note. Number 3 might jump up a little more dynamic than number 1, 2, and 4. So now it pushes the right side too loud. So your compressor on your aux reacts to that. What I do is I compress them all individually. I match the compressor settings, and then if they aren't vibing together, and this is when you can look at the meters, because it's the same source 4 times. So then you can make the meters match, and it makes sense to look at the meters. So if the meters start matching, once I even out that compression, then I'll de-S them together. Because same thing with S's. You look at the waveforms, one S was later than the other S, and one S was earlier than the other S. You got 4 S's in 4 different spots, unless you use something like vocal line. So why de-S them together? You need to do it individually so that de-esser reacts when de-S happens on each individual vocal. That's a lot of people just do a de-esser on the aux track, and I at least will do the first de-esser if there's more than one on the individual tracks. And then as far as EQing, you can EQ one group note with an aux, but then your next note, if you have a high harmony and then a medium harmony, your medium harmony, if you're going to EQ them as a group, that needs to be a new aux because it's in a different frequency range. And then your low harmony is in a much different frequency range. There's a lot more low end in that vocal. It needs more top, more air, it needs maybe some more filtering than your high end one does. So those need to be treated separately, not all as one. And I think a lot of people, they just try to treat it as stereo. And I've done it myself where I'll do that and they'll be like, no, let me not be lazy and let me go through them individually. And I always beat it. It's always better.
I definitely owe you a turkey sandwich for that one. Definitely. And
Ham and cheese. Ham and cheese.
I owe you one for that one. Then would you use, like, if you're having to deal with, like, ridiculous count of background vocals, would you probably, I'm imagining you would use more like a channel strip plugin so you could just dial everything in and then copy and paste that plugin? Because if you have multiple plugins on across 30 backgrounds or whatever, that seems like a lot of work for
Try 200 vocals. I do K-pop songs that have upwards of 200 vocals sometimes.
So do you use a channel strip type plugin? Is a better application or no?
No, because like let's take Metric Halo Channel Strip. It's one of my favorite plugins on the planet, but I don't consider the compressor good for vocals. I love the EQ. So my rig is so powerful, I'll have a compressor on each vocals, and I'll copy that and then adjust accordingly if I need to adjust for a different vocal. And then I'll do de-essers on every vocal, all 200, and I'll do an EQ on every vocal. And I'll copy those plugins and use them as a starting point and tweak as needed. But I don't know if there's a channel strip out there that I like every component of that channel strip on everything. Like sometimes even background parts, like Eric talked about tempo of a vocal reacts differently with different compressors. So I might have these long note, whole note background vocals, and I'll use the LA3A plugin by Waves on it or UAD. And then I'll have some fast vocals that I'll use the CLA 76 or the UAD 76. And then I might have some really loud chants, and I'll use the McDSP CB 101 compressor on. So yeah, channel strip to me is just limiting yourself if you're trying to just make your job easier. And I don't know, I'm kind of a glutton for punishment when it comes to mixing. I think I make things harder on myself. Maybe it could be done with a channel strip, but I don't really do that.
200 tracks of background vocals, that's insane. That's like 5 days. That sounds like about 2 days of work right there.
Yeah, it's like a day and a half. Like they'll have 7 members in the group, and they all have their leads, they all have their ad libs, they all have their doubles, they all have their harmonies, and then you got 2 rappers on top of that. K-pop is insane amount of tracks. So
Metric Halo would be if you were on a deserted island with the coconut and one channel strip plugin, it would be Metric Halo.
Well, the thing of the channel strips out there, there's I know Waves has a couple. I use a lot of Waves, but I don't use any Waves channel strips. Yeah, probably the Metric Halo. I wish that Fab Filter made a channel strip. Mm-hmm. That would be cool. Because that's something that I could use their de-esser, their compressor, and their EQ, and their multiband. If that was in some massive channel strip, I could use that on every vocal and just that one plugin. Their stuff is great. But yeah, probably the Halo would be my Desert Island channel strip. The gate's good. The compressor's good for a lot of things. I tend to like the Metric Halo compressor channel strip, or channel strip compressor on drums and percussion stuff, and some keyboards. I don't really use that compressor for vocals ever.
But you really like the sound of that, huh?
Yeah, the EQ is really good. I wish the EQ was just its own plugin. I use that all the time.
Bill was ranting and raving about the Metric Halo. I've never actually tried it, but he swears up and down by that thing.
It's just got a good sound to it, and it's fast. I like fast EQs. Like I love Waves, and I use tons of Waves, but that Waves HEQ is the slowest working thing ever. I can't stand to use that EQ. I want to EQ fast before my ears get used to the wrong EQ. So the thing about the Fab Filter Pro Q 2 and the Metric Halo is that you can just grab the little dots and yank them around, do whatever you want, get your frequency right, and then if you need to go to the bandwidth knob and adjust it, you can. So it's so fast to work with. Those two are really my favorites.
Okay.
My main go-to is the Fab Filter EQ.
Yeah.
always. Yeah, I was rocking the Renaissance EQ for years and years and years, and then I changed out and started using the Fab Filter EQ.
Why?
Because of the ease of use, like
And bands, it has
crazy bands and
24 bands.
Yeah, and the layout on it too. You know, it's got a frequency analyzer on it, so you can really see what you're going. And you can see problem areas when they jump out. You know, like, oh, there it is. You know, grab it, pull it down. You know, it's just easier to use.
And every band could be any type of filter, whether it's a low pass, high pass, shelf, bell, square bell, where you take something like a Renaissance EQ, the middle 4 bands, if you use the Renaissance 6, those are bells, and they can be shelves too, but I think the ends have to be filters or shelves.
Yeah,
right?
they can only do that. And then with Fab Filter, you know, you can change it to the proportional Q mode, you know, where you can grab one and as you boost or cut, it narrows the bandwidth, you know. The higher you go or the lower you go, the narrower the bandwidth gets, all in one, rather than you having to sort of adjust the Q and the...
And the sound.
And there's that.
There's a you guys have a video with these guys called Young Flood, and is he actually are you guys actually, that microphone he's holding and yelling into, is that actually recording, or are you recording with that second mic only?
No, that's him recording on that mic. Yeah.
And you actually use some of that, like, I mean, when he's actually holding the mic?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I used all of it.
Yeah, Eric did all that recording and video production. I didn't work on that.
Yeah.
I think sounds great.
But he's grabbing the mic, and he's grabbing the mic.
For sure. I mean,
it's a Lewitt mic, which, you know, we've always endorsed Lewitts.
Yeah.
Their live sound mics are they're practically studio mics, and they have internal dampening, so you don't hear handling noise. Mm-hmm. They're a lot harder to get feedback. I recorded a vocal last weekend. The guy sitting in my control room while I'm monitoring on my big speakers at a medium volume. He was sitting on the couch singing along so the drummer and bass player could hear him. No feedback, no problems at all. Yeah. And we were hearing his vocal come through.
I do that with a cardioid microphone, super cardioid if I have to, and I like it because I like having the person in the room. But I'm sitting there thinking, okay, these dudes are taking this to the extreme because he's screaming and like grabbing the mic, and I'm like, nah, he's not recording that. It's that second mic only. But you guys actually did. Okay.
Sure.
You guys are saying stuff that'll, like, if we were in a chat room with some engineers and I said this, they'd be all over me. Oh, you're stupid. Oh, you can't do that. Mastering stuff, holding the microphone.
Yeah, about that. This is why I sometimes I'll type a Facebook post or a response to somebody, and after I've typed the entire thing, I'll delete it and then not ever post it. Because engineers are so opinionated and feel like they know what's right. And Eric and I, this is the reason we're friends, is we A/B stuff. So the reason I endorse Lewitt mics is not because they gave me a bunch of them. It's because I put them to the test. I took a few, and then Eric came down to my old studio back in 2008, and tried them on piano. We tried them on acoustic. We compared them to a 414. We compared them to a 57. We did the test. We put them to the test. We checked them out. They're kick drum mic, my favorite kick drum mic. I just did a session at Glenwood. I used the classic Beta 52 for day one. That night, I came back at the end. I came to my studio, grabbed the Lewitt 640 Rex, took it to Glenwood the next morning, and got a new kick drum sound, and was so happy I did so. It's like we are A/Bers. We compare things. The gear in our studios isn't because it's the famous gear that's out there on the market or the standard things you find in studios. The gear in my room is weird to a lot of people. They're like, what is that unit? And I'm like, oh, that's the AMEC Rupert Neve 9098 that most people don't know about. And I have it because I love it and I love the way it sounds. And I've compared it to other things. And that's how we do everything. So when we make a statement about something we like to do, so many engineers do what they've learned from their mentors or what they discovered on their own, and then that's their way. That's what they decide is good. or they saw it online and they copied it. Now they do that. And that's their own technique. And you tell them something different, and they rip your head off and can't believe you do that. But if I do something, it's because I've compared it to everything else. Not to say that you can't show me something new. I learn new things all the time, and some of those things replace my old ways of doing things. But we do something that someone thinks is wacky, most likely we've vetted it, we've tried it against other things, and we like it better. So.
And you end up erasing messages. That's funny. Posts. That's funny.
Yeah, because I'll have an opinion that I feel strong about, and I know if I post this, I'm gonna have to keep posting it for the next day and a half defending myself. So I just don't post.
What I've wanted to start doing, because when that happens to me, the last time it happened to me, my response was, okay, let's meet with a bunch of your highfalutin peers. And I'll prove what I'm saying in front of them and you, because I'm hip hop. It's like, to hell with you. Let's battle. Let's demonstrate. Because I'm from an advanced electronics background where it is, if the captain comes in and says, can this system be up? And I say yes, I have to do that and I have to prove it. Like there's no, I have a Grammy type stuff. You have to either put up or shut up. And that's what I want us to start doing. Like when we have these arguments, I want us to start meeting face to face. Like it's a hip hop battle, demonstrate. And if you guys say, huh?
I just had one 2 days ago over power cables, high-end power cables. Some guy posted a video that was shot right here in Erik's room about these high-end power cables, like $500 power cables, and that they were bullshit. And Pensado was interviewed right here in Erik's room talking about them. And they were like, yeah, Pensado got paid to do it and all this stuff. And I jumped on there with this. Took me 15 minutes to write this defense about how I was there. That's my building. I'm in that, that's Erik's room in my studio. We tried those power cables. We heard the difference. We set up A/B test. We didn't want to believe that they made a difference. Who wants to spend $500 on a power cable? That's crazy. But I went into this whole defense because I've heard the difference, and so did 7 other people in the room. And it wasn't like, oh, I barely hear something. It's like, that's a drastic difference. And all these guys were on this Facebook post. Yeah, show me some meters, and I want to see the difference in the voltage and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. I heard it. I still hear it. So some engineers, and they were big dudes, like engineers that have been around for decades, and they were just ragging on it and calling Pensado out. And of course, he's not on Facebook to defend himself, but it's so frustrating because it's like, go and listen, try it. None of these guys have tried it. It'd be one thing if they tried it and they said, yeah, I heard it, it didn't do anything. But that wasn't the case. They're just defending because they don't want to believe it, or they don't think it scientifically makes sense to their head. And that's where Erik and I differ. It's like, well, let us hear it. And then if we hear it and we like it, well, yeah, sure, we'll use that.
Like I say, it's time for us to get hip hop with this, and we meet up places and.
We had the same conversation a long time ago with Maor Applebaum, and he was saying the exact same thing about how
Appletown.
No, Maor Applebaum. He was saying the same thing about power cables, like not even audio cables, like power cables going through things, making a difference in what you can hear.
I have one of those expensive power cables on my Mac, and if I play a WAV file from my desktop, it sounds better with that power cable on my Mac than a cheap $10 IEC cable. And that blows most people away.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot figure out the science behind it, and I don't know the science behind it.
It doesn't make any sense, but like you said, if you can hear it, you can hear it. That's it.
Yeah. So
what mic was this where he was handling it? Because I want to make it to where artists can get into it more and remove as much of the studio as I can, to where they can actually, if they're used to live, they can do whatever they need to do. It was a black handheld mic.
Yeah. They have we have 3 of their handheld mics, and it was either the MT. There's only 3 choices it could be. They're called MTP. That's the series.
Okay.
We have the 540, the 340, and then we have one that we definitely don't use. has a switch on it.
Right.
So it's either the 340 or the 540.
Well, they have mics and the other ones, and they look the same. There's ones that are a dynamic mic, and then there are other ones that are condenser mics.
But they're live.
Live handheld condenser mics, and that's the one. That's the one I was using.
Because I was using the Blue 100 microphone. It's Blue something 100, and it's a dynamic mic. But I was using it in the studio, and I was just like, I'm really liking this sound. That's your song, Ben? Ben's over there jamming. But if I can have a mic where that people can grab it like that and get into it more, man, I'm all for it. Because more and more I'm getting into the performance of it, and I'm like actually the engineering. My brain has gone now to where I've got to get this performance more and more and more just better. And engine, set up, record well, and then that performance of that artist is like key to me. And then the songwriting, like that's where my head is. After all of this engineering stuff, it's like, man, we got to get some songs worth engineering, worth mixing.
Yeah.
So
that Young Flood song, I mean, that guy, his vocal on that particular song, I mean, it's very aggressive. It's very belty. He's like making ground beef out of his vocal cords when he's singing. It's a style, it's a texture, and he's going for it. But ultimately, that was just it. It was like having heard when they came in that day, or prior to them coming in that day, I wanted to hear what the songs were going to be so that I'd have some type of concept on how I wanted to set up for it. And I heard the demo, and I was like, oh, this is going to be kind of heavier, like, screamy, belty type vocal stuff. So rather than
$149 for the mic he's talking about.
Oh yeah, what is it? The 3?
That's it.
Yeah, the 350, MTP 350 CM.
I can probably afford that.
Yeah, $150.
And it needs phantom. It's a handheld mic, but it's actually a condenser.
Yeah.
That's why it sounds like a studio mic. I mean, that's one of the reasons it helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've used these mics on. I had a guy and a girl doing a folk country kind of rock song, and they wanted to be in the same booth facing each other. And I still needed to tune them because they didn't have the best pitch. So we had two of these mics set up across from each other, and I used pop filters and everything just to make it more studio sound. And there was so little bleed, I was still able to tune it, but it still sounded like studio quality. Add my plugins and give them that sheen that I do on the studio mics and everything. So the Lewitt handhelds are by far some of the best.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's some handling noise in that recording, but ultimately, like, he ripped on that performance. Like, he went for it, and I was like, I don't care what happens. This is the take. Like, this is going to be the vocal take. It is what it is. So even if there was handling noise, I don't remember. That was so long ago what I did on the mix, whether I was riding the fader down like crazy, if there was noise or whatnot. But
if there's damping on that, the handling noise probably sounded just added to the excitement, the character or something anyway. So
yeah, they kind of have like an internal shock mount in the body of the mic, like that. They're actually really heavy. Like if you hold an SM58 and then one of these Lewitts, they're about 1.5 times the weight because they have an internal shock mounting in them.
Okay, Jarvis, are you there? If you are, you have to unmute yourself. If you have a question for him, Jarvis, and then palm mute Mitchell. Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
How have you guys been around your career with like falling and rising relevance and just in general scaling your pricing and business while being a mix engineer? Because obviously you're not the one pushing the sales, but you're obviously dealing with a lot of like different size artists.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty sliding scale when it comes to charging for mixes. Major label mixes, I have 2 rates, one that's pretty high and one that's a lot higher. And then for indies, I'm kind of all over. It really just depends more if they have a decent budget, then I can give them more attention and put them on my calendar and not have to shift them around. If they have a lot lower budget, but I really like their music and I want to work on it, then what I do is I have a low amount that I won't go below, but if they're pretty close to that, then what I'll do is I'll just tell them, hey, if a higher dollar mix comes in or something important, I'm going to bump you a couple days and we'll get back to your stuff. And that's kind of the trade-off for them paying less. So I kind of have a sliding scale when it comes to mixing. When it comes to tracking, I have a set rate that includes a studio. That's the other thing is we work in a commercial facility. So our studio, we kind of price it into our price that we're charging as an engineer, just because it's worth something, so yeah, that's how I've done it.
Yeah, it's the same way for me. I do try to help out clients, like especially on a tracking date. I give people a discount if they book. They come in and they're like, well, I only need 2 hours. Well, that's the highest price you're going to pay is if you only need 2 hours. But if you need to book 12 hours, I pull that back for you because I appreciate you bringing in more work for me. So I'll help you out some more on the price. So that's kind of the way it works for me. If you book multiple days, like several days in a row, I'll even discount it further based on just the fact that you booked out the studio for 3 or 4 days, straight. That's great work for me. It's good money for me and I can help you out. So that's kind of how I do it for that. And as far as mixing goes, it most of the time it's a flat rate. There are some people that are so new to coming into recording and they've never really been in a studio before, so they don't even understand the difference between the recording process and the mixing process. And they kind of just assume, oh, I'm going to go to the studio and I'm going to record this song, but their expectations are that they're going to walk away with it being this finished, polished, completely done, ready to go. So that's a conversation that you have to have ahead of time. And a lot of times when you tell them that, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. And then they're like, well, this sounds like way too much, like money-wise. So sometimes I'll work with them on that. I'll say, all right, you got to understand that there is a different process here that is mixing, that is separate from the recording process, and trying to educate them a little bit. And sometimes that's to the benefit of me getting the gig, and sometimes it's to the detriment and I lose the gig. But the more those type of people are educated on that stuff, the better chance it is for that to become more of the, I don't know, I'm not going to say norm, but more people out there that are wanting to learn or wanting to come in and record their songs in a commercial facility. They have to understand that these are separate processes and require separate attention and separate amount of time. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I just was curious on it. For myself, like I currently only work with established musicians only. So it's like people that don't know how to record, that's not even in my spectrum. It's mostly just like trying to figure out, like trying to scale budget according to clients, because I am in between like people who have like a couple thousand subscribers, followers, to like people that have like 1 to 2 million subscribers on YouTube, like that range kind of. And usually when a song gets mixed by me, we'll get somewhere between like 50,000 to like 2 to 3 million views. So it's usually always like really hard to like price it correctly, because I also often end up doing more than just mixing. Usually if I get asked to mix, I get asked to executive produce. If I get asked to master, I end up mixing. And usually I do like one step more. So it's like often very hard to price appropriately, especially because I need to stand in more to make sure it's a good product at the end of the day.
All right. I mean, that can be hard. I mean, if you're taking on extra jobs, above and beyond what you originally were called for, and they're not expecting to pay for them, just because they didn't think ahead of time to think that they needed that separate process, or they didn't know that it was a separate process. I'll run into situations where someone will send me a song to mix and the vocals need tuning, and I mean, if I had to tune all the leads and backgrounds on a song, depending on how many vocals there were, I might want a few $100 for that time. I mean, it might take 4 or 6 hours depending on how many vocals there are. And for them just to expect for me to include that on a mix, I mean, that's half of the mix time right there. If I spend 8 hours on a mix, but I also have 4 hours of tuning, now it's a 12-hour mix, you know? So you just got to decide if, I mean, if you're going to call him back and say, hey, you need to have these vocals tuned, or you can pay me to do it. I can't do it as part of the mix. Or, hey, I'm not a mastering engineer, or I do master, but that's a separate fee that I have. Or if it's, you know, a project you really believe in, you think it's going to really explode and it has a chance, and you want to just jump on the team and help out, so you throw that mastering in for free, just because you believe on it in it, and you know that they don't have the extra budget. A lot of times, I'll just have conversations with people when they first present the project to me, so I can get a grasp of everything that they need to do, and who else are they working with? Do they have a mastering engineer? Do they have someone tuning the vocals or time aligning the drums before they bring it to me, or are they expecting me to do that? And I try to kind of figure out all those things before I start the work. That way there's no surprises. And sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes, you know, you just get surprised with something and you got to deal with it. But I got to say, me personally, sometimes I just suck it up and get it done for the good of the project. And then other times I'll stop them and be like, hey, you know, you either have to pay more for this, or you got to go get it done with someone else. Whatever you want to do, take your pick, you know.
Have you guys ever, well, how often do you guys find yourselves doing work but then saying you don't want your name on the project because of whatever the decisions are that someone is making?
Well, not really because of the decisions they make. It'd be more because the song wasn't that great or the production was horrible to begin with. But to me, that's kind of a bad road to go down. I would more just turn down the project at the beginning and not even do it, you know. So like, I know, take Pensado, for instance. I think Herb, who manages Dave, he always hears the song ahead of time before Dave accepts the gig. So Herb has already decided if it's a good quality thing to work on. So that's kind of a good barrier between something that you don't want to put your name on. So they never run into that, you know, in Dave's case. As far as someone making the decision later that made it something that suddenly was an embarrassment where I didn't want my name on it, I don't know if I've ever had that happen later. It would usually be a song that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to mix this anyway, you know.
What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the same thing. I don't think I've ever really been in that situation where something changed after the fact and I was like, oh no, you got to take my name off of it. I've never been in that boat. So I did see when I was many years ago, I watched JJP go through a thing where he was just downright adamant, like frustrated that people were trying to change a I don't know, it was the A&Rs or, oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. They were trying to change a vocal delay on a vocal, and Jack was just like, no, like, no. He was like, no, it's going to ruin. Basically, he was like, it's going to ruin the record, and I do not want to have my name attached to it if that vocal delay gets changed to this, whatever it was, you know. And it was heated, and you know, kind of on the outside looking in on that, and I was just like, man, over a vocal delay, okay. But I don't know. To answer that, I've never really been in that boat, so I can't really speak to it. But I usually always put in the best work I possibly can, and I'm proud of it, you know. And if it's a project that was gonna get massively, you know, spread out, then it was probably good enough. If it makes it that big and it gets dispersed that big out into the ether, you know, then great. But even if it was something that wasn't the best song or production wasn't as great, I don't get too hung up with my name being attached to it, because at the same time, if it wasn't good and people aren't going to really give it that much attention anyway, and turn it on, listen to a few bars and be like, nope, next, not going to really spend the time necessarily to be looking me up and going, why did Erik fuck this up? I just don't think that's going to be their mindset, you know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't get too worried about it.
Again, part of my thing is right now is songwriting, getting something worth being mixed. What are some good songwriting material where I can go out and purchase that you guys can think, or can you guys think of any good resources?
As far as what?
Songwriting.
Like song libraries?
Songwriting resources, like for writing lyrics, melody.
Oh.
Man, I'm the wrong person to ask on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Bruh, you wrote out some great comments for MJ's vocal, so I'm like, you know something. I wouldn't, man.
No, as far as like resources to learn songwriting or improve songwriting, I just don't know about resources like books or videos or stuff. I'm sure there are. That's probably more of a Brad Chapman question.
Okay, well, I've found a bunch of stuff, but I was hoping that you guys knew some that I didn't, that I could go and purchase. I'm trying to collect everything, and I'm experimenting.
Yeah.
I'm doing all kinds of stuff. Okay, so you stopped using the HG2 on your master. Why?
I just got into a bunch of records in a row, I think, a few months back, that it didn't work for the sound on the master bus. I needed like a much more cleaner, unaltered sound harmonically, you know.
Was that after you got the plug-in and started using the plug-in all over the place?
No, it was actually a couple months before that plugin came out.
Okay.
So there's a project Erik and I both worked on. Billy Porter, who's a Broadway actor, he did an album with a bunch of R&B features like Lettucey and Deborah Cox and a bunch of heavy R&B stars. And that low end we wanted really clean, and I actually also have a saturation plug I usually use on master bus, and I think we took that off for that whole album. And then right after that, I did an album for Selena Albright, who's related to Gerald Albright. A lot of people know him, and her album was the same way, same type of R&B low end, and I just wanted certain sound. So for about 20-30 mixes, I didn't use the HD2 on the 2 bus, and then I started using it on my guitar bus. I really liked it, and then the plugin came out a couple months later, and I just haven't put the HD2 back. There's nothing wrong with it. I just, sometimes I just get in these modes and don't think about it. If someone mentions it, then all of a sudden I might, oh yeah, let me try that again.
Robert Weber says hello, and he says he told me to tell you he watched the drum video.
Oh, the drum video. Okay, cool.
He just messaged me and told me to make sure that I tell you guys that.
Nice.
Okay. I think it was you, Erik. There were 2 mics on a cabinet, and when it came time to record them, you recorded them mono onto a track. You said it how you wanted it, and you said something about recording what you wanted. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, why didn't you leave those apart so that you could blend maybe one part of the mix, have one mic up louder, like ride them emotionally or whatever? Why would you record them on the one track instead of leaving them the way you can ride?
Well, I actually, if it was me that said it, that would have been a while ago, because what I do now is I do record them on 2 separate tracks. But I definitely, I never use them where in the verse, I've pushed the one mic, and then come the chorus, I swap their positions or I blend it differently. I usually find a sound that way, and I commit to it then. But I don't think I've ever really grabbed the 2 different mics on one speaker.
I do that.
Cabinet, but
yeah, I blend all the mics together, like during the recording
from the get-go. Like,
yeah,
sum them down.
I
and
commit to it because to me it's an EQ. So if I have a Royer, and that's kind of
yeah, it was you, because what you're saying right now is what you said in that video. The same words. Go ahead.
I have the Royer. It's kind of the low end, and the soft high end, kind of the pleasant high end, and then the 57 is the aggressive mid range and high end. And I'll set that EQ how I want it right then and there, and commit it for many reasons. One, if I'm not the mixer, I don't want someone else screwing it up, which is kind of selfish of me. But I'll already have them perfectly in phase and they're ready to go. They're able to be committed. If I'm doing a miking position where they're not going to be in phase, and the waves will need to be slid later, then that's the only time I would print them separately. But I don't do that. It'd have to be some weird request from the artist or something. But yeah, I just go ahead and commit, because when I'm working on the song with the band or the artist, whatever, I just want to see bass, guitar 1, guitar 2, guitar 3. I don't want to see guitar 1, mic 1, mic 2, mic 3, DI, guitar 2, mic 1, mic 2, mic 3, DI. That always bugs me. And when I get a song to mix that has that, I get them how I want them, and I bounce them to one track, even for the mix. I just commit. Because the other thing is, I'll start to overthink it, and I'll look at those faders. I'll be sitting there all day, and I'll be like, oh, hey, there's the 57, and there's the DI. Maybe the 57 should be louder. And I'll screw with it. And like, I just get that out of the way. I'll just decide this is how I want it, print it, and be done. At the same time, if someone sends me a mix, I want them separated, because I don't trust the outside world to combine them.
You don't want anybody messing up your stuff, and then you don't trust people. So okay.
I don't trust people with their own stuff, unless it's coming from a big engineer, or someone that has experience.
That whole committing to something that sounds good and getting good at knowing what your results are going to be later on. I got that in Pensado students. People kept saying that they did that, and I started experimenting with that, but I didn't have the hardware, so I was doing it with plugins. And I have to honestly say, I never turned back. It worked. I would open up a session with nothing on it, press play, and the shit just sounded good. I'm just sitting there like, damn, all that, because I'm used to opening sessions and then saying, okay, I got a whole lot of work to do. But instead, I started recording to where the recording just sounded good to me. And it was just a whole new, it was just like boof, whole new reality. Does anybody have a question before I ask this next one? Cameron?
I got a question.
Go ahead. Well, wait, hold on one second, Ben. Cameron, do you have one? Ben
No,
is always ready.
I was just gonna say I'm cool right now. I'm enjoying the just listening. Sorry.
Okay, Dave. No, Cameron, go. I mean, Ben, go. I'm gonna call you everything but your name today, bro.
Okay, man. Bill, Barton. Anyway, business. I'm curious about if you guys have any like cold-hearted techniques on how to convince artists that you work with to just shell out the funds, just in general, because, I know that it's hard for a lot of artists to pay the goods for the quality that they're looking for. I run into it all the time where, they have a certain budget, but they want it to sound gold, but they might have the aluminum budget. So, like, any tips on just negotiating and figuring out the middle ground, or how to make it work where you can kind of easily come to an amicable exchange and then just get to the creative? I mean, I'm always curious of how people approach the business side.
Quick answer is no.
Yeah.
So, but you never know. You guys might be savages on that side.
Not really. I mean, every now and then I'll get somebody that really, if they come in and I'm sure all of us have heard it, it's like, oh man, I got this project and it's gonna blow up and it's gonna be amazing. And it's 100% the best thing you've ever heard, and it's gonna blow. It's just a matter. We just got to get it recorded though. We just got to get it done and get it out the door. But it's gonna be amazing. I'm sure all of us have heard that. And when that happens, that's when you start getting in the back and forth about rate, and it's like, okay, well, if it's going to be this big thing, and I'm going to give you my not that I wouldn't give you my best effort, but at the same time, it's like, okay, so this is epic, right? Okay, all in. I'm bringing in everything that I have, all my gear, my studio, my time, everything. I'm full force. I'm in it with you, and you've got $300. It's like, but this thing is so important to you, right? So a lot of times you can flip that, and you can just say, well, you know, what is this for? And you're like, well, this is my everything. This is my dream. This is what I've been hoping to do. And you're like, how important is this to you? Well, I saved up for, you know, whatever, and this is the most important thing in my life, right? Well, guess what? This studio and the work I do is the most, you know, one of the most important things in my life, and it costs real money, and it costs my time away from my family. I'm not just doing this for fun. Like, this is my career. So I mean, we've got to find a number that works for both of us, you know. So that doesn't happen a lot. I just know that we've all heard that line from clients before, you know, or potential clients that are trying to come in and lowball when we know there's more money out there. You kind of got to flip that on them, because they want you to feel like you're going to be part of this epic thing. But it's like, hey man, if it's going to be epic, you're going to expect epic results, which means I'm going to give you everything I've got. And that costs real money in real time. So you've got to pay for that, you know?
Yeah. I've always been a really nice guy when it comes to business, which is definitely hurt me. So I now have a manager to interject and do that on my behalf, and she's a lot more firm. But on certain projects where I don't use her, like more indie stuff, if someone's quoting me a rate, like they're asking me to do something for the rate they want, that happens most of the time. Is people want to pay what they want to pay, and they don't care what my rate is. They ask me what my rate is, but if I don't tell them the exact number they're thinking of or lower, they just don't answer. Like the email you just hear crickets, so they just disappear. So I ask people, well, what do you have budget wise? And it's like, well, what do you charge? Well, what do you have? Well, what do you charge? And so the best thing to do is to quote the rate that you want or that you've been getting, you know, the past couple years or so. And if you lose the gig, you lose the gig. Some people, they won't negotiate. I don't know why. I'm always open to negotiation, and some people do. It's really weird, but the most powerful thing you can do if someone approaches you with a price that you're not cool with is just say no. And if they really want to work with you, they'll come up with more money. If they really don't have it, then they'll usually say something like, well, I honestly just don't have it. Is there any way? And then you can come up with things like, well, I can't give you priority, but I'll do it in my spare time. So you have one mix, just give me 3 weeks. And sometime in that 3 weeks, when I would be home watching TV, I'll do your project for that rate, you know. But don't call me asking, where's my song, you know. So you can get into offering things like that, or just flat say no. I'm only on this rate, and that's what I charge. A lot of different ways you can handle it, but it's so hard, like to get people to be honest with what they can afford, and it doesn't matter where they are in their career. If they want to work with you, they want to work with you, so they'll come at you with the lowest rate, you know.
How does it work with the manager when you get bigger gigs? You get her to help you kind of.
I literally just email, like, contact my manager at this email, or I'll CC them together and introduce them. And like, she handles my business. She'll tell you the whole spiel. So she has her thing of what my rates are and what we're doing, and if there's any rules or stipulations, which there's hardly. But so that way she has the conversations, and she has the skills and techniques to see if there's more money somewhere and stuff like that.
Somebody gave me a good tip the other day. I was late on the wagon, but somebody said, pass, cheap,
Oh yeah,
or good.
right. Pick any two.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep, yeah, that works. That works. I'll tell you something that definitely will open you up to getting more work possibilities, or I should say, it'll open you up to being turned down less, is if you can take credit cards, which is so easy now if you just get the app, you know. But I'm surprised there's so many engineers that don't accept any kind of credit cards. And I've had conversations where I'm going back and forth on a rate, and I say this price, and they're like, "Oh, I can only do this price," and we're about to say no, let's not work together. And then they'll be like, "Oh, but do you take credit cards?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And all of a sudden they can do it. They're like, "Yeah, sure, I'll just charge it. I can do your rate, no problem." So absolutely be able to take credit cards for sure to anyone out there that doesn't.
Nice.
100%.
I got a question. All right. If you guys could, I don't know, it's, I guess, kind of a two-part. When you're hired to mix a song, you're obviously hired by an artist to mix that song as they see fit, correct? How do you balance giving the artist what they want with your mix approach, your mix sound, if you will, your character, your personality, and adding that into, or do you not? Do you just serve the artist? Is there a balance that you try and find?
Yeah, it's not always the artist that it's up to. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's up to an A&R or producer. A lot of times it'll be a producer of the track that'll have a favorite mixer that they like and they want to go to. And you do run into that. You do run into, okay, well, the producer wants it one way and the artist wants it to be a little different way. And that's where you got to put on your shrink hat and really get into that world. And I got a lot of respect for guys that do that well. It's a tough thing to play when you get caught in between the person that's hired you that's not the artist. That's a very tough, sometimes can be very tough to make both those camps happy. But yeah, Bob.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say Bob can probably speak on that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I wish my last name was Lord Algae so I could just be, no, it's my way.
Right.
But I'm too nice to that. And I'd say when you get into the major label world, if the artist is 10 records in and they're a Beyonce or someone super big, they have the power over everybody. When I mixed Lupe Fiasco's album 2 albums ago, I talked to one producer that whole album. Every other producer was locked out. Like Lupe didn't let them be part of the mix process. It was just, what does Lupe want? Achieve what he wants, and we're done. And one guy kind of got his way through, and I talked to him and made sure he was happy, and Lupe was cool with it. But the lower level, like the first album, major label artist, it's going to be all about the A&R guy, and he's going to overpower, unless it's a super producer like Timbaland or something, he's going to overpower the producer, the artist, everybody. And you just got to give the label what they want. Otherwise, it's not moving forward. Like, you're not getting to the next step. And then down on the indie level, it's whoever's writing the check and whoever called you. So it's probably we get both. Like, we get producers that we're dealing with, and the artist is just kind of trusting the producer. And then we get the other way where the artist just has such a vision. And I'll tell you, the more indie they are, the more vision they have, and not in a good way. It's like they get paranoid about the panning of every little shaker and hi-hat and stuff. And so that can be tough to deal with. And sometimes sometimes people, I would say, the higher up they are in the business, the more they hire you for you.
That's what I was going to ask next. Are you hired for your sound or for the way you work with these people? Like, they know you, and I know so much of it is personality and just, vibing each other.
Most of the time in the last probably 5 years, I've hired for me because they liked something about me. Whether they saw me on a video on the internet and liked what I was saying, or that's usually a producer, or they've heard my work and they just like what I do, and that could be a producer or an artist. But definitely before 5 years ago, and then occasionally every once in a while, I'll get someone where it's like they just need an engineer that I don't blow things up and ruin things. So they just want what they want, and they want me to be the guy to do it. And that can get annoying because sometimes people are like, oh, well, can you make it sound like Dr. Dre? It's like, go hire him.
Right.
That's the smartest thing to do.
Mm.
And like, well, I can't afford them. It's like, well, I don't make things sound like Dr. Dre, or I do, or whatever, you know. So that can get frustrating. It's like people don't hire you for you, and I don't know. It's like I like to service the artist because in the end, a lot of pop style music or rap stuff like that, it is about the artist. It is their song coming out. A lot of producers, especially in urban music, if you make the drums bang, they're fairly happy. So making the artist sound captivating and them liking the sound of their vocals usually goes a long way with them. When you get into working with bands, then it's a committee, and you got to force everybody to get on the same page. And I know Eric and I have both run into where the guitar player wants this, but the lead singer, who's supposedly the leader, he wants this, and they can't agree. But they're emailing you on 2 different emails, or calling you. And at that point, I just say you got to stop that. Everybody come to the studio Tuesday. Let's knock this out together. You know, or you guys go talk about it and argue. Once you agree, tell me what you want.
Right. How often do you have the artist in the room when you're mixing?
Hardly ever, me personally. Yeah. It's like, that often. I would rather, because I don't want to be doing some weird side chain
experiment, and they're like, "What's going on?"
And then be like, "What are you doing? You're messing it up." Or the other thing you do is they tell you, "Oh, I'll just be a fly on the wall. I won't make backseat driver comments." And you're working on the drums, but the vocals in there, and they're like, "I don't like the vocal reverb." It was like, there is no reverb, and I haven't gotten to that yet. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
So there's only been occasional times where I do want the artist there, and that's because something is so complex with their production that they have that I need questions as I go and answer it as I go. Otherwise, I'll end up redoing stuff and spending way too many hours. So I've had a couple of those where it's helpful to have them there, and I'll just tell them, leave me alone for a couple hours. Okay, now I have some questions. Answer these. And but 90% of the time, it's just I get it done, come listen, or I'll send it to you and tell me what you want different.
And you just do revisions through email and stuff too?
Yeah, most of the time. It's unless someone's local, and even if they are, a lot of people just don't have time these days.
Right.
A lot of stuff is over email. And that's another thing. If someone is working over email doing tweaks, and they're like, okay, raise the vocal, and you do it, and then they're like, oh no, go back, lower the vocal a little bit, and you just keep going back and forth and back and forth. Then I usually stop it and tell them, okay, you got to come in if they're local, just because it just between bouncing a song, emailing it, waiting, getting the revisions back, and then doing it, it just adds into days and days and days.
Yeah,
it goes on too long. So.
Cool. I guess just along those lines, then, what would you guys say each of you is the key to your sound? You know, I know that's kind of vague, but
oh boy, I don't know.
Or maybe what's your? I know everyone like focuses on the vocal as the main, you know, obviously in a song or whatever. But I don't know. Yeah, areas that you think are your specialties or the key to your sound or your focus when you mix.
I like drums that sound like real drums, like a kit, you know, if we're talking about a rock song. I still want them to be punchy and in your face and aggressive, but so I do use samples with my drums, but I like them to still have this sort of a natural sound rather than this hyped up, like super pumped up, inflated, you know, steroid sounding type thing. I don't know.
I like super pumped up, steroid inflated.
So yeah, if there's anything, I'd say that might be one signature thing I try and work on. And I like loud guitars.
Yeah.
Really loud guitars. Yep.
I just, I like what I like, and it turns out a lot of people seem to like my low end and my vocals. Like those are the things. My clarity. Those are the kind of things people comment on. You know, I've always since I started back in at school, I was always going for the most clear mix possible, where you could hear every little detail and every little instrument. And I kind of took that from the Bob Clare Mountain records that were popular back then.
I was going to ask if you guys had who your influences were as mixers.
For me, it started out as Bob Clare Mountain, you know, and then probably moved on to Serban, you know, and then a lot of it though is less influence and more me just searching for what I like, you know, and every mix getting better and better, and trying something I thought of or something I heard about, you know, and incorporating it into my flow, and moving on from there. And you know, things change. Like I the way I do things, you know, someone might watch a video of me explaining how I do my vocal chain in my mix, and then 2 years later I'm doing something different, you know. So we evolve, you know, through all of our mixing processes, and you know, the music and the material kind of leads us. So.
And how do you guys try and stay fresh that way and keep learning?
Oh, as far as as far as techniques, staying fresh, I think it's just something that happens naturally. I don't try to always be learning new techniques. It's just something, you know, that happened. You know, someone will come up with something. I watch a video on tutorial on someone and be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me try that, you know. But as far as staying fresh musically, I'm just always referencing. So like once a week, I'll go through the iTunes top list or Spotify top 50 and just listen to everything on there and just kind of notice trends and try to guess what the trend, how that's going to evolve over the next year, you know. Talking to guys who are working on bigger records, Pensado, you know, Dylan Dresdo, you know, any of those guys, and what are they doing? You know, it's like, so as far as staying fresh musically, it's just listening.
I like to ask a lot of the other, like if I have bands that are coming in, like I had the neighborhood come in a while back, and there was an amazing conversation that took place where it was each member of the band, and we all kind of went around, not formally, it just the conversation sort of evolved that way, but it was like, what are you listening to at the moment? What were you listening to this morning? You know, and I was like right there in the conversation, and I was like making notes on my phone. I'm like, okay, so that's what these cats were listening to. And some of it was like obscure stuff I'd never heard of, and some of it was older, like a lot older, obscure stuff that I'd never heard of, you know, from back in the 70s. And then there was some new stuff that was out that I was like, oh, okay, so this is new, and these cats like it, you know. And so I make it a point to try and do that with a lot of the guys that I worked with. I'm like, what have you guys been listening to that you really enjoyed lately? You know, and that sparks up a really good conversation, and all tunes me into things I never knew.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. Good tip. Nice. Cool.
Dave, you got anything? Bill?
I just want to know where you guys got all the cool Jenga blocks for the ceiling in there.
The Home Depot. Yeah.
Actually, in all seriousness, the ones in the back arrived on a pallet that's 3 foot.
Yeah, that came from no, just a fun fact for you, Dave. Like I knew I was gonna make these diffusers on my back wall, so I went down to Lowe's, and I found their bin of wooden dowels. And you pull one of these dowels out, it's 3 feet long, and it costs like $9 for one of them. It was ridiculous, just stupid expensive. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to make these diffusers on the back wall paying $9 for a 3 foot wooden dowel. So I looked on the decal and said it came from a mill called Madison Mills in Nashville. So I jumped online, found them, and called them directly, and they told me, yeah, we usually, we don't sell to individuals unless you we kind of have a minimum amount, a quantity that you'd have to order, and individuals usually don't need that much from us. And I said, well, I need 2,600 linear feet And he was like, all right, we can help you. So I bought it direct from them. Each one of those direct from the mill, 90 cents.
Nice.
Wow. $9.90. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely nuts.
Bill?
You
I
guys
usually throw to Bill because he can just jump in. He's like my partner, so you know.
Yeah, I'm here. What's up, fellas? If you guys haven't checked out the Kush Audio Omega Transformer 458A, I suggest you check it out. Sounds really good.
Cool.
As the harmonics in it, it makes things sound realer.
Yeah.
Realer.
Realer.
Very nice.
Cool.
Didn't you go to MIT or something, Bill? With that realer?
I did.
Realer?
Realer. But hey, but you know, I can't, you know, it's funny now that you mentioned that. I can't music. Who was the guy that said, I think it was Sheps, he said something like explaining about music is tap dancing about architecture, something like that. I can't find certain words to explain the differences that certain things make. I just can't find them. All I know is that I like this much better and I believe it more when I listen to this, right? So it's like with the UAD Lexicon 224. Like that's just about the only verb that I use. Because when I'm sitting here, it makes me believe I'm listening to somebody singing in a cave. As opposed to, okay, they're singing and there's the verb on them singing, right? I can't explain that. I don't have the words to explain it. All I can do is say, hey, check this out, because with it on, it's better than with it off. So that's where you get realer.
Nice. I also want to know what that beer was you were drinking. Yes.
This will be the Foster's, sir.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
Nice.
Serban, everybody says Serban. What do you guys get out of Serban when you listen to his mixes? What do you notice?
Well, number one, when I say Serban, I'm talking 2004 to 2008 Serban. Specifically.
Serban the Ghost. Nice, Bill.
Hey, before you continue, there's no media on that dude whatsoever. The only reason I even believe he exists is because Dave Hampton said so.
Yeah.
I've never, other than that, I've never heard of anybody running into him. I've never seen any pictures of, there's a picture of him on like an interview they did in like 2000.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys have met him. I don't know. I'm convinced it's just the screen name for some mixer that doesn't want to take credit.
Right. No, he doesn't want to do interviews. He won't do Pensado's place. He's just a very private guy. I mean, there's still,
and it's working. He's doing it.
There's some engineers out there that just don't want you to know their process and what they do, but unfortunately, everyone that works with them talks about it anyways, so it's out in the public whether you want people to know or not, you know.
Right. But I'm not even talking about his techniques. I'm just saying there's no pictures of this guy at any conventions. There's no pictures, nothing. It's really strange. It's like Kaiser Sosa.
Yeah. He's a different guy, and he works in Virginia. You know, he's I don't know. I don't know him personally, but I mean, now the rumor is, and I believe it to be true because executives have told me, but he has a team of people that basically mix for him, and then he'll take a song and spend some time on it at the end.
Makes sense.
So when I say I like Serban, I like Serban
when he used to actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of mixers are doing that these days. A lot of the bigger mixers. I'm sure he spends time on a song, but I believe he was spending more time on it himself, back a few years back. But that's not why I like the mixes, because of that issue. It's I don't know. I think back when there were CD credits to look at, I knew I was listening to a Serban mix, and now I don't know unless someone tells me, "Oh, Serban did that," you know. I did hear a record recently. I can't remember the artist's name. It was a country artist, and they had a lot of the big heavy hitter mixers on that album, and Servant stood out like crazy. Like it was one of the 3 best. That guy, Justin Niebank, and another guy, and all the rest I didn't really care for. But I just like his stuff. It's I guess rather than say how it sounds to me, I think it sounds how I would have wanted that song to sound when I listen to it.
Yeah.
And not that he and I sound alike. We don't at all. But I definitely wouldn't mind it sounding like him if I did, you know? So I think that's why I like his stuff. It's just, at the same time, I like Manny Marroquin stuff because it's kind of, it's different than what I would expect, and I like it. You know, I hear it and like, oh, wow, he did that. I wouldn't have thought of that. So those two polar opposite reasons for liking those 2 mixers. That's kind of why I like Servant.
Yeah, that's similar to how I give credit for songs. If I really like how a song sounds, I'll say that sounds like a record. You know, not meaning, you know, obviously vinyl, but I mean it's like that's all together. It sounds like a record. If I really, really like it, I'll say I wish I had mixed that.
Yeah.
Those Bogner, am I saying it right? Amps.
Yep.
Bogner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of you guys has said it was real versatile. Have you guys actually mastered that stuff yet? Like, are you just going there and turn knobs? I mean, have you really dug into what that amp can do?
Yeah. It's the thing about that one is there's so many controls on it, and
It's insane.
And the combination of engaging those in different combinations tweaks it like crazy.
It has weird things on it like speaker excursion, dampening. So
It's like
how
how far
your
the cone
woofer
comes
moves,
out. Yeah.
you can make it move less, so the low end is tighter. Like it has that kind of adjustment. That's crazy. It's literally like 6 amps in one.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
It's,
Great amp. It was a great purchase. It's a great studio tool. You know, I mean, I love having that available when we have guitar players that come down and it's like, you're not digging the sound. It's like, well, let's try the Bogner. 9 times out of 10, we can always dial in something that sounds great and stays on the record. You know?
Yeah.
Did you guys already discuss studio expansion?
Meaning what?
Isn't that something you were doing a while back?
We were working on that, and we ended up pulling out of that. It still happened next door. Pensado's got a room next door, and we have friends over there. So there's between our studio and their studio, there's 6 rooms total. Erik designed all of them. So it ended up happening, but business-wise, we decided mutually not to make that part of the Echo Bar. So.
Roger that.
Yep.
The on the ribbon microphone, you guys are using a ribbon microphone on an actual cabinet, which of course back in the day they were too fragile. Can these ribbon microphones, Royer ribbon microphones, really like take a lot of loud pressure, or is there?
Before Erik answers that, do you always say fragile, or do you usually say fragile?
Oh man. Ready for a real question too. I'm like, wait, huh?
Yeah.
Modern ribbons definitely take a lot more SPL. That's why people like the Royers. But even the new AEAs, I've seen guys use those on.
Yeah, the AEAs like the Nuovo, the N22s, and the what's the other one? The N8.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But even like the R84.
Oh yeah.
Those take SPL.
Yeah.
It's like the old.
It's the old RCA ones.
The ones RCA ones from the 40s, 50s.
What about
those are the
vocals? People spitting on them, you know, as they're singing or whatever. Are they easily damaged by that, or are they pretty rugged for that too, to where they can take the vocal abuse there?
I don't know. I've definitely put we've got a 121, and I throw that thing in front of loudspeaker cabinets all the time, and it's great. They're definitely not. You know, you can't use Phantom. I've had them plugged into like a Neve 1073 LB. And one thing that I think is a design flaw on that preamp is the knob for engaging the phantom power. It's the trim knob, but if you push down on it, it engages the phantom. So if you're going to adjust the trim on the preamp and you actually grab it a little too hard, you can push down and the phantom kicks on, and if you've got a ribbon attached, boom. That phantom should have been on a whole designated dip switch all on its own, or a button.
Yeah,
but
they thought they were clever.
they thought they were trying to pack it all into that tiny little thing, and they made it hard.
Don't make excuses.
Yeah. But I've definitely had, I've had some interns that came in and grabbed that, and they were like, every time if I have an engineer that rents my room out, I always tell them, look, if you're gonna use the 121 with the Neve, be mindful of this, because you will blow it up. And I've had it blown up. Luckily, Royer's just over in Burbank for us. And I know if it's a brand new mic, or even if you're the new owner, they'll transfer ownership, but they'll re-ribbon it for you for free the first time. You do it again, you're going to pay $120, $125. But quick shout out to them. They were actually really cool. I had some cats in from Australia, and the ribbon, mine was jacked. It was blown, unbeknownst to me. And it was in the middle of, we were getting ready to track, and we went down to take it down to them and just say, hey, can you fix this? And they said, sure. And I said, these guys are only here. They're all the way from Adelaide. They're spending a ton of money, and they can't come back. Like, we can't put this on hold. And they're like, oh, well, borrow one of ours. And they didn't even charge me for a rental. They just said, we've got yours. You take ours. Really cool dudes down there. But they are pretty robust. I mean, I think they can take quite a beating, but definitely not the Phantom. Not the Phantom.
What about the saliva? Because these artists, the saliva hitting the mic, are you able to clean it, or are they?
No, but I mean, we usually,
vocals.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really used it on, but we tried it with Jables at one time. But typically, I think you're going to have a pop filter probably in front of that thing anyway. So I'd hope that the pop filter would filter some of that out. But I don't use it on vocals a whole lot.
Why not?
I don't like the sound of that particular mic for a lot of different vocals, especially if it's a big pop, ballad vocal or heavy rock vocal. Like, I don't want them getting crazy with that mic, especially if I want to give them a handheld and let them go nuts. I'm not going to hand them the Royer.
It's also a figure-8 mic. Most ribbons are figure-8.
Yeah.
So you're picking up behind the vocalist as well.
Yeah.
Which can be odd.
You might get weird room sound blended in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some of our favorite vocals are with ribbon microphones.
Not arguing that, I guess, but I mean, my understanding of it was, we had ribbon mics way back in the day. That was like the American sound was the ribbon mic, and then finally we got our big tube condensers from the Germans, after World War II, so on and so forth, and that was just, they ended up kind of taking over. But no doubt. I mean, a lot of the old Frank Sinatra, a lot of the old crooners, they were singing on those types of mics. Amen. Absolutely. But it's a different era now and a different sound on, pop radio nowadays.
That Samuel Canuck was all over that Kemper and in love with it. And when you guys were showing me about the Kemper and the feel, you were talking about how it reacts. Did you guys ever get a Kemper? Have you been able to play with one in the studio or anything?
No.
Nope.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
We got the Scuff.
You got the what?
The Scuff'em.
Scuff'em, S-Gear, Scuff'em, that plug-in.
That's one of the best guitar plugins there is.
Yeah, it's a good one. I use that one a lot.
Okay, I've never heard of that. Scuff'em.
Slate.
Yeah.
Slate?
It's Slate. Well, no, they put it out. It's through the it's a separate company, but Slate released it.
Okay.
Yeah, a company called S-Gear.
Yeah.
S-Gear.
Yeah.
I've heard of S-Gear, but okay.
It sounds really good. I did a James Bond documentary with 3 guitar heavy songs, and they gave me the guitar DI unprocessed through any amp, and then 2 mics of amp mics. And it was basically 1960s kind of surf guitar kind of sounds. and I use the DI with the Scuffum, and I beat their amp miking every time. So,
Wow.
plugins that.
I'm a guitar player first. That's what I started as. So, and I have amps. I usually use the simulators these days because they're just convincing enough to me, I guess. I don't know.
Even though all the guys are in these chat rooms like saying that these plugins are just don't have the life, don't have the.
There are some that don't, and there are some guys, again, like I was talking about before, that they're diehard. If it's not a real amp, it's not good. If it's not a $10,000 mic, it's not good. They just think like that, you know.
Yeah, but when you do the AB, they can't hear it.
Yeah, like the Kemper. The Kemper, to me, I would put the number 95% to the real thing, and that's off of the AB test on their own website, I believe, or maybe it was some random person on YouTube. But somewhere there was a really good AB of a Fender Champ, 1965 blackface Fender Champ, and threw it with a Telly, and they had it on input through the recording system, and then they had the Kemper that had just modeled it with the same settings, and it went back and forth and back and forth, and to me it was like 95% as good as the real thing, to the point where if you weren't doing the AB, you'd probably think it was the real thing.
Right.
And then let's take the Slate mic. Everyone says that thing sounds great, and to me, when I listen to the ABs on Slate's video where he goes back and forth, it's about 90-95%. I don't hear it as exact, like a lot of people say it's 100%. I hear it as like 90-95%, which I think is good enough. I think it's, you know, especially.
Yeah, for the money, you get all those flavors that are so close that.
Exactly. And just as a source capturing a vocal, it's a great mic.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been one to be like worried about if an emulation sounds like something vintage. My worry is more, does it sound good?
Right. You know, does it work in the context you're using it in?
So if I use a UAD DBX 160 VU, I don't care if it sounds like the real DBX 160 VU. Is it something useful that I can use that I like the sound of? So.
And is it giving you the results that you're looking for? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of guys stuck on, you got to use this processor for this instrument, and you don't.
I see guys beating up the 737, and then here's Dr. Dre still using the 737.
That was one of the first channel strips, and it's on tons and tons of hit records. It sounds great. It's got a great EQ. A lot of them give them flack that it's not the same EQ as the 2055. Who cares? It's a different piece of Avalon gear, and it's awesome. It's not. I don't know why anyone would say it's crap. I don't get it.
Okay, Bob. That dude, Erik, what's something that he actually taught you that was like a game changer, really good? Something that you learned from him.
I'm sure there's a few things. I mean, offhand, the way he mics overheads, I definitely have been doing that lately with drums. I just definitely have my own theories on miking overheads, but I also like what he does. The way the mics he uses for toms, which are Lewitt 640 Rexes, the condenser side. I've stolen that from him. What else have I stolen from you?
You look like a proud thief, like, yeah.
Oh, because it's not really stealing. It's just, you know, we see
Communal
each other
pot.
working on stuff, and you know, if it's better than what we're doing, we do that. You know, why wouldn't you? You know. So yeah, I don't know. We have a house drum set here, which is incredible. It's not even really that expensive. It just really sounds great. So it's kind of cool when I see him mic up that kit in a different way than I do. I can. It's a lot easier because the next time I use my own drum set, I can mic it up the way he did, and it's going to give me the same results. Versus the old thing where you see an engineer like, oh, he's using a pull tech on a bass guitar. Well, the next time you have a pull tech and a bass guitar, it's going to be a different bass guitar.
Right.
So how do you know it's going to work? So that's the one cool thing about having a house drum set and us both having different techniques and watching each other. You know, hi-hat. Yeah, it's all drum stuff. The way you do hi-hat, I now do hi-hat, except it didn't work yesterday.
Oh, what mic did you use?
A Bayer 160, which is different than what you do it with.
Yeah.
All right, Eric, same question to you.
Well, shit. How much more time do we have? I could go on and on and on. God. Where do I begin? I mean, really. Come up with something good here. Multiband compression. Bob kind of schooled me on multiband compression just from ground up, like, oh, okay, this is a multiband compressor. What does it do? You know, and from that point, I've learned and watched him use C4, C6 all over the place. Vocals, heck, even on stereo 2-tracks sometimes, and learning more some of the ins and outs of that stuff, multiband compression. Mic placement on kick drums, and it kind of touches on him, but like one thing that I always see a lot of guys do, stick the mic in through the port right up against the front side of the head, and you're getting just all like just the clicky part and not getting more of the tone of the drum. So backing the mic out a little bit more, and having a conversation about that and really going through some of those paces of doing that. Learned that. He clued me into the right-angled 57. He had one that he made, I think, back in college. It had a Bud Light cap, beer cap. So you take the 57, you unscrew it, you make it into a right angle, and then he took a beer cap to cover up all the exposed wires and then wrapped it all in gaff tape, but just left the Bud Light symbol on the back. Classy mic.
Bud Light 57?
Yeah, Bud Light 57.
That's great.
And, you know, you can tuck that thing in underneath a hi-hat now rather than having that long 57 and then the cable attached to the end of it where you would never be able to tuck it under a hi-hat because some drummers put their hi-hat so close to their snare drum there's no room. So that right angle 57 trick Bob taught me years and years ago, which I've always loved. I do it to this day. I still do it. Man, tons of stuff.
Okay, Bob, the on multiband compression, would you speak on it so that whoever listens can, when they go to use multiband compression, they'd have the right mindset or certain things they can do with it?
Sure. I guess in that sense, I would talk about what to be careful of. And that is, and this happens with EQ in general, when you go to work on one frequency area, it naturally changes other ones. So for instance, if you have a vocal that's, or anything, guitar, something like that, that's got a harsh mid-range, so you park a band of multi-band compression around 1.5 to 3K, and you start compressing that down, maybe 2 to 4 dB. Now all of a sudden, down around 200 to 400 hertz seems more exposed, more prominent, and you didn't work on that area. You're pushing down the mid-range. But what happens is frequencies cloud each other, so that low mid bump was always there. You just didn't hear it because the mid-range was more prominent. Now that you've taken care of that mid-range, now your low mids are too prominent. So now you got to put a band over around 250, 300. You start compressing that, and all of a sudden you hear too much 6K. So now that's exposed. So what happens is you end up chasing your tail and going back and forth, and you fix one thing and it exposes another. You fix that, exposes another. You end up doing 4 or 5 bands of multi-band compression, and that can really alter the sound, especially a vocal, to where it starts to sound not necessarily unnatural, but it starts to sound less than that singer, and more like something different. So that's one thing to watch out for. And the real way to avoid that is, if that's happening, then some of those areas don't need to be multi-band. They need to be static EQ. And the other thing is, you can also fool your ears by working like that, working with the multi-band. So you need to do it in context of a mix and not soloed, so that when you do fix one area and it exposes another, is that just your ears suddenly hearing something more prominent, or is that really a problem that you need to address? You know, so I see a lot of people overuse multi-bands and have, you know, all the bands working. And not that I don't. Sometimes you can use that as a tool. You can also use multi-band as a regular compressor by using all the bands. So it's a full bandwidth compressor like any other compressor you would use. You just have one or two of the bands doing something special, whether you use their gain makeup as an EQ, either negative or positive. So you're brightening one band, but they're all compressing the same amount of reduction, or maybe one band is just a little bit stronger on the ratio, the range. So you can treat a multi-band like a regular old compressor as well. And I've gotten a lot of good lead vocal sounds by doing that in the past.
When I first started using the multi-band compressors, the first one was a LIN-MB Waves, and I thought I was doing something wrong if I did not use every band. And I spent about 6 months to a year with that thing and with a couple others, just really digging in until I started listening and started attacking problems. Like, oh, that one thing is an issue, and I would attack that one problem, and I was like, okay, I'm not using the other bands. It felt like I was wasting, but I like the results, so I'm just going to move on.
Yeah. Well, no, that's the right thing to do. I mean, you know, that would be weird for something to really need every single band. I mean, I've gotten messed up sounds where they need every band before. But yeah, it's probably not the case unless you have something that really moves a lot of frequencies. Like in a case, like you have a filter synthesizer that starts really high and it sweeps down low with a really resonant peak. That might be helpful to have a multi-band and have it cover most of the frequency range. You know,
the only time I use all bands now, like my normal use for all bands now, is leveling the whole thing out as a special effect type thing, like doing something creative with it. You know, that's it. Other than that, it's one, maybe two bands, like what you're saying.
There's I do use all the bands if I use the Limitless plugin, which is something new that I just discovered the last couple of months. It's made by, I think, DGM, called Limitless. It's a limiter that is multi-band, kind of like the Lin.
LIN, yeah.
And that one, the purpose is to use all the bands. It's kind of a mastering kind of plugin. But yeah, multi-band is difficult. You can really ruin something, but you can also really save some sounds.
Speaking of that, have you used Soothe yet?
What is it?
SOOTHE, Soothe.
Nope.
Check it out. It's very interesting. It's multi-band. It's kind of like Paul Frindel's DSM, Dynamic Spectrum Mapper. But basically what it does is you bring the threshold down, and you know how you would seek and destroy for whistles? It does it automatically in real time all the way across.
Huh.
So basically you would put Soothe on your hi-hats, let's say, or not hi-hats, your overheads, right? And they're doing all kinds of crash cymbals and whatnot. And you can see these thin Q peaks dipping out of it, and it just smooths it out. Yeah, SOOTHE. It's just called Soothe.
Nice.
I use it on vocals. It sounds great.
Nice. Very good.
Cool. I've never heard of it. All right, that one-stop shop type stuff with this, where you guys put out a song and the master engineer has not even touched it. You guys know saying stuff like that'll tick people off, right?
Yeah, but it's just the way the world is these days. I mean, I don't know many engineers that don't do that. Usually the ones that don't do that are either younger in the business or the guys are a lot older that are close to retirement. I mean, all the big mixers turn in their stuff like that. You have to. I mean, the A&R people, the executives, the artists, sometimes the producers, they're going to compare your mix to something else that's out there professional. And if your stuff is 10 dB lower and super dynamic, it doesn't sound right to them. And that happens a lot more often than the opposite. I had in the past probably 6 years, I had one project that asked me to take off my mastering stuff, so to speak. And I don't even call it mastering stuff. It's just my mix bus. And they were used to getting songs. It was actually a foreign project. It was a Chinese project. And they were used to getting mixes the old school way, where they're really dynamic and there's going to be a big mastering change to them. And I turned in my first mix like I usually do. And they were confused. They're like, "Why did you master this? We need to mix it first." So
no, that's my mix.
All right. So I had to adjust for that one project and do it the old school way. But other than that, people are going to be like, why does it not sound like Drake? Why does it not sound like, Katy Perry? So if you don't want to lose the job, because that's the other thing is I've heard stories of guys losing mixes, and it turns out another mix was louder than theirs, and the artist had no idea why she liked that mix better than that mix, but that one was louder.
For me, what I find cool is trying to mix to where it's loud like that without squashing the master fader.
Right.
And it's like people think that can't be done, and yet it's been done for years.
Well, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you got to do that first, and then if you still need more volume, finish it off on the master fader. But if you do it all on the master fader, it's going to sound small and crunchy.
Right.
You have to kind of pre-bake it, get it ready to be loud. You have to. It's all in the balancing of the faders, and controlling of peaks and huge out of control low end. You have to control all that stuff, contain it, get it in a nice package, and then hit the master fader and finish it off from there.
I had to make sense of stuff at first. Like I would get a compressor, set the fastest attack, fastest release, and or I would have a compressor where I would see it taking off, say 6 dB, but I didn't hear any change in sound at all. And I'm A-Bing my butt off, and I'm thinking, okay, this ain't doing nothing. And I didn't even trust the meter. I was like, I don't trust that meter. This manufacturer might be lying to me. But that became useful because then I could, those peaks were, keeping, destroying what I call destroying headroom, eating up headroom. And I'd go around shaving off these peaks. I actually I spent a lot of time experimenting with shaving off peaks, not with limiters, with compressors, shaving off peaks, and trying to make it to where I couldn't hear what was happening. And there's a lot you could actually get away with without actually hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one trick like that I use on my 2-bus when I'm having a hard time getting a song loud. I'll use the API 2500, and typically I use either the slowest or the second slowest attack time and the fastest release. But if I'm having a hard time getting a song loud, I'll use 0.1 to 0.3 millisecond attack time and hit it a lot earlier, a lot harder, and then slow the release down. Speed the release up to the fastest. Usually I use 2 notches up, so 0.3 millisecond or 0.3 seconds release. I'll go to 0.1, and I can get a little bit more volume that way, at least another dB or 2.
So you would shave a peak off and then push it forward even with the release being fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of brighten it even. Okay.
That's hardware. That's hardware you're talking about, or software?
Software.
Software.
That's a good parallel trick to do with your drums as well, where you smash the heck out of the transients, but it's in parallel, so the original unmolested sound
Sure.
is in there too, so it doesn't sound as processed. You know.
Very cool. Yeah, Angela Lewis is watching us. She's over there in Korea right now, but she said to tell everybody, hey.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, sis, you're supposed to be joining in, but you'll beat us up because what time is it over there, Bill? Do you know? Anybody know what time it is in Korea?
I don't know. They're like 14 hours off or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's like it'll be 2 in the morning when we're doing something. She's like, "Look, guys, y'all, come on now."
I think it's plus 11 hours.
Huh?
So it's plus 11 hours. So
yeah, 11. See what I mean? Like, yeah. And it's 8 p.m. here, so it's, I guess 11 from you guys are in California.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's 8 p.m. here. So yeah, it's the middle of the night over there where she is.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions for them?
You guys are just down Fulton?
We're on Fulton.
Yeah. That's where I live.
Really?
Yeah, I live right off of Fulton, between Victory and yeah, I'm right, literally 5 minutes away.
Yeah, you gotta come by sometime.
I definitely want to. Yeah.
Yeah, Fulton and Sherman Way, just north of Sherman Way.
Yeah. You get Kuru Thai, the Thai food there. Yeah.
Well, Eric isn't allowed at Kuru Thai.
What?
So we get kundang a lot, or they don't serve Eric for some reason. 2 times in a row. We were eating and they brought my food and did not bring Eric's food.
There's got to be a poster of somebody in the back that
looks like you.
Like, if this man sits down, do not serve him. I've given up on Kuru Thai. They gave up.
Oh man, they're the best.
I know. Like, fuck. What's a guy got to do to get some Kuru?
Yes. Damn. That's like when they have the Polaroids of the shoplifters in the store. Not feed him.
Yeah, not this guy. They always smile from behind the counter. They're always like, I'm like,
That's no problem for me. I always get my food.
Yeah, he always gets served.
I went over to Cameron's and I was expecting this stale mix setup, like the stale studio thing. I walked in there. This place, it was like vibe, and what people call vibe, and it was for production. They produce and mix like it. I was like, oh damn, you can really do work in here. Pretty cool spot.
Cool. Nice.
Oh, so anyway, as it stands, me and Hub, nobody knows this yet. As it stands, we plan on getting a Raven desk with at least 2 Raven monitors and the Slate microphone. And we're planning on getting a building together here in the Fresno area. So we're stacking chips, as they say right now. And so don't be surprised if whenever y'all see us pop up with that shit. Yeah.
You're gonna use the Raven? You guys had 559 up there.
Huh?
I thought you guys had the 559 studio up there.
We did. They do. I walked away from that about 2 years ago. Yeah,
right.
I walked away. I was done. I'm like, I'm out. I mean, I cut losses, took hits. It was all bad for me. But I am so smiling now, like so much better. Because nothing holds me back, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I can move and grow and do But no, I walked away, and I've been with them. All those guys I trained, and I've been training them since 2008. And so to walk away with them being skilled and all of that investment was worth it. But it was, you're really walking away from that many years. But I actually progressed more like this, even walking away from that. So I'm like smiling big these days. I can't even explain it. So
good for you, man.
Cool. Nice.
So anybody have any questions? And I haven't been back to that studio since I left. I'm done. Cool. Love them. I'm cool. So anybody else have any questions? Okay, that barbecue, bruh.
Yeah.
Wait, When is your birthday? What day is your birthday? Did you say August 20th?
Mine is the 27th of July.
27th. I thought you guys said August.
That's when the barbecue is going to be. Has nothing to do with my birthday.
27 July. Okay.
I won't even be in town on my birthday. I'll be out of town.
Okay. I was thinking maybe we'd have it on your birthday in August, but okay.
No, in August, I was just suggesting that we do it, I don't know, first or second week of August. Eric and I are both going on vacation this month, so it's got to be in August sometime.
You guys vacate?
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I told Eric, Dave, I was walking with him out to his car, and he said, well, I didn't prompt him or anything. He said, yeah, we got to get with Eric and Bob and do a barbecue. It's about time. And I was thinking, you goddamn right.
Excellent. Well, maybe Matthew Weiss can be on grilling duty.
Yeah, we can put him on the grill. Yeah. Not him on the grill, him manning the grill.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't wait, guys. The only thing is I had a list of names of all the new people I would be bringing instead of my old crew. And my phone, I have a new phone now. I have no idea what those numbers are and like nothing. I don't have the only reason I have Eric's number now is because he called me. Like I lost all the numbers. So anybody who has AT&T, if you have AT&T and they've been backing up your numbers are no longer backed up. You got to save that to Gmail or something because they stopped the service in April. And my phone went dead in July. Wow. So, and I didn't get any message or nothing, so my contacts are just gone unless I can somehow pull them out of that phone. Who knows? But yeah. Anyway, that's FYI for anybody who's on AT&T. Back those numbers up. I lost a lot.
Yeah.
All right, you guys have any questions for me then? If before I head out.
Good, man. Enjoyed hanging out with y'all today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time, guys.
Thanks, fellas. That was awesome.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yep. Now I got to edit this video for this 30-year reunion this Saturday, and I'm straight.
Nice.
I'm going to come by sometime here soon. I want to come by if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be awesome. I didn't know you were so close.
Right up the street.
That's awesome.
Oh.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Nice.
Yeah,
All right, fellas.
We're out.
Yeah.
Guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Mott. Thanks, guys.
See you, Mott.
Appreciate it.